Michelle.
Oh, I thought I was over there. That's so well.
That's where you're.
Just go on. I'm so used
All
to
right, Susan, we are live now.
it. All right, thank you.
Sure.
No, I just give her the matter. No, I just. She was at this one thing. That's so crazy. Like. Oh, this is your. Oh, you're fine. I'm good. No, it's okay.
Let's call them.
Are you calling?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, good afternoon. Let's call the meeting to order. Teresa, would you please call the roll?
Joycelyn. Gordon,
Here.
John,
Here.
Michael,
Here.
Lori, Dr. Pandolfi,
Here.
Brent,
Here.
Noel,
Here.
Ron.
Here.
Ronald, I'm sorry. Rita,
Here.
Dr. Wilson. Jill. Here. Yeah.
Okay, next matter is to approve the agenda. A promotion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
A second.
Discussion.
I want to, in consideration of everything else that's on the agenda today, I want to amend the agenda to strike 7.7 and 7.8. These are matters that we don't need to deal with this evening, and that would allow us to have a more topics. Second.
It's been moved and second that we amend the agenda as Brent proposed. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstaining. Okay, passed. Now we're going to be moving to approve the agenda as just amended. So have to entertain a motion for that.
So moved.
Second. Discussion. So then we just say that we approve the agenda as Brent's changes. So all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstaining. Good. Next matter is the consent agenda. It covers the minutes from the previous meeting as well as the report on expenses. That should have been on board. It is on board docs. Motion to approve that.
I'll make a motion.
In a second.
Second.
Good. Okay, so moved in second. Discussion on this. Anything about the expenses or the minutes? Okay. Second that we approve the consent agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Good. This matter, preliminary business, we have guests. I'm assuming that most of you have signed in for speakers.
These are the 6 that are within the time limit, so only they can speak.
Okay, so we have for speakers that went through our process, Mark, Beverly, Jim, Lynn, Courtney, and Joey. Okay, our bylaws are not specific as who speaks first or whatever order, so if it's okay, we can just go through the order. I'm presuming this is how you signed up, come first served. Our bylaws also do have a 30-minute aggregate limit, so just as a consideration of the other folks, if we have 6 people who want to speak, if you want to do 5 minutes apiece, however, it's not required at all, but if you're willing to do that, that'd be, I think, helpful for everybody. So, Mark, is Mark here?
I am.
Yes, sir. You're first. Well, thank you.
Mr. President, can we ask people to identify where they live?
Oh, yeah,
That would be helpful.
good idea.
I live in Platte County, Kansas City, Missouri. I ask all of you not to vote to cut the levy. I ask you to do no harm. That is what healthcare practitioners, and helping professionals, that's their number one starting premise, do no harm. So I have to tell you, I've only lived north of the river. I've been here before. This is my third meeting. I've only lived north of the river for about 4 years. We moved up there to help my mother-in-law. I only became really interested in the library situation when in Blue Springs, my oldest son worked for the library, and I love the library. But then I became particularly interested in this situation when I read all sorts of things that really went against my heart that people on the board were saying. So I just want to give people a reminder, sort of a history of where I see this coming from. Not to say I never read anywhere that board members disavowed comments from their fellow board members. Okay, that was extremely disturbing. So 11/25/2019, Kansas City Star talks about how board members talked about how the efforts by the library were homosexual and globally driven. That's unbelievable to me. That's unbelievable to me. We have up in Platte County, we're the fastest growing county in the metro. We are rehabbing the airport. We have a new FBI building up there. And we share with Clay County the new Meta storage area. Platte County and probably Clay County are growing tremendously. And they're becoming much more diverse, much more diverse. So that astounded me. Then I read some other things about how the board's own research was turned down because it was viewed as Marxist. Diversity, equity, inclusion. It was quoted as, what is this acronym? And it's Marxist, and that seemed to fit in with some other statements. So we should erect a wall in Platte County and keep out anybody that's not white and right. I don't get it. I don't get it. It was also said, diversity for diversity's sake is unconstitutional. The library is no place for transgender programming. What really got my interest going was when I read an article about how it was recommended to the prior director that he do a book report. Remember this one, folks? A book report on white genocide. I look at this board here. I don't think white genocide is a problem for this board. Okay? I just don't see it. That got me concerned. Then we get into the financial aspects of this, which I read about. This is all public, in the public square via newspapers, local newspapers, also Missouri newspapers, maybe even nationally quoted, given that there is a movement now to shut down libraries. So what I read was that this goes back, the financial aspects of this goes back to 2016 when the levy, when there was not a problem with inflation, when the levy was not allowed to be put on the ballot by Platte County trustees until a judge ordered it. There was no inflation problems back then. We're now here today. That we have some inflation problems. But from whatever I've seen in terms of attending the 2 meetings prior and reading and studying, the library is in good shape. The library is in good shape. And I saw where the audits continue to show the library in good state. And then I also saw that the governmental agency that awards agencies for good financial management, that continues through the years. So in my mind, I'm thinking something else is going on here. Something else is going on here. I also note that recently 2 people were taken off the finance committee board. Was there an explanation for that? Is that in the board minutes, why these people were moved off? I don't think so. I don't think so. So I'm asking you to not vote to hurt the library. You don't know what these actions can do to the system. You don't know. And if you're an educator, psychologist, whatever, would you have this done to your school or to your professional practice where you cut without knowing how it's going to affect? If you're a surgeon, you wouldn't do that. You would diagnose first. I have to tell you what I'm going to do. I talked to the state auditor, the office of the state auditor. I'm going to start a petition to have this board audited. I need to know that everybody on here, there's not a sense of nepotism, that there's nobody making money off of this. I could be wrong, okay? But when I read the first things about homosexuality and globally driven and this and that, that got me ticked off. So I'm going to start a petition, and I'm looking for people to help me to have this board on. Thank you. Oh, one last thing. I sure hope that you watch the second episode tonight of the US and the Holocaust and what was done by this country to the Jews of Europe. And I hope you remember that when you're thinking about saving us in Platte County $5 to $8. For me, I could blow through 2 bags of potato chips really easily for $5 to $8. But to cut $4 million from this budget, so I want you to watch that. I want you to know what's being done or has been done to people of color in this nation. If you're a teacher or a psychologist or whatever, how could you ethically even think about cutting the budget? Could you think of that happening to your school district? All of a sudden there's a cut, and then you're left trying to figure out what's going on when there's no reason to cut. I sure hope this book continues to be on the shelf, and that when a cut happens, if it happens, that books like this and other books are not kicked out, like a school district in Tennessee did to this book, like it's being done all over this nation. A library is the center of a community. Don't let people destroy this beautiful, wonderful system. Thank you.
Thank you. Beverly?
My name is Beverly Powell. I have been a resident of Jackson County since the day I was born. I was born in Jackson County and I'm still here. I'm a CPA, have had my own firm in Jackson County for nearly 50 years. And I've worked in Jackson County since I was 16 years old. The voters of our communities overwhelmingly approved the 40-cent levy in 2016. Because we have seen the Mid-Continent Public Library system evolve to meet the changing needs of our communities. Because we have had confidence in the organization to use the funds wisely and frugally in the future as they have in the past. Every one of the businesses that I serve continues to hunt for literate, motivated, thinking individuals to hire. In addition to its basic educational role, Mid-Continent Public Library has been a key player in programs to retrain adults to meet those needs and to help the citizens in our community remain independent and provide for their families. It's not about welfare, it's about providing opportunities to remain independent. The board of Mid-Continent Public Library should not violate the will of the voters. We knew what we were voting for. It was made very clear to us, and we're willing to pay the cost. We expect our wishes to be honored by the board's support of the staff recommendations, which remains well below the voter-approved levy. Thank you.
Jim?
Good evening. Hello, everyone. My name is Jim Oldebecken. I live in Clay County, Gladstone. Thank you for the opportunity to say a few words. I read the news. I love to read the news. I don't trust the news. I'm just glad that we have in our country, in Missouri, in particular the Sunshine Law, we have the opportunity to read ourselves records, and they are invaluable. They tell us a lot. And for the last 5 or 6 months, I have tried to apply myself to review so I can understand the issues and really the actions of the governing body here and their concerns. And I have paid attention to, and these are concerns that I have, and there's many things I'm not concerned about. I'm delighted with the library system. And I'm deeply appreciative of any citizen that gives up their time without compensation to serve the public. I thank you for that. I have great concern about what I've in public records references to efforts to censor, select, deselect holdings, resistance to an existing diversity, equality, and inclusion plan. What the previous two have addressed regarding cutting the levy rate. Now, this really concerned me, having to do with a decision to swap the chair of the finance, removing the treasurer and another board member taking that spot. I wonder why. And then also recently, this really concerned me. 2 members of the finance committee were removed. And I look back to look at the minutes of the finance committee and the board, and those appeared to me to be those individuals who have resisted some of the direction and decisions of the finance committee chair, with all due respect, and perhaps even the chief elected officer. And then also I have concern about in the midst of these other matters, in particular, not having finance committee meetings when they are supposed to be held. And then at the last meeting of the year, before the statutory requirement to affect a new budget, the finance chair presented his own budget without apparent approval by the finance committee, and also without a public opportunity to look at the alternative budget. And so now with the audits, I paid attention to that. I think audits are kind of like adjournment. Motion for adjournment is always in order. We have heard. And I think for audits, I'm okay with that. But I don't think we've gone far enough because of these matters regarding governance and apparent variances with, well, at least the intent of our statutes regarding a budget, revisions to it. And in particular, this, the Missouri Public Library Trustee Manual from the Missouri Secretary of State's office, which delineates our responsibilities in those areas. It brings me to really Mr. Stoneman, Mark, his comment regarding perhaps it's time for an outside look. And I didn't really think of the topic of bringing this to the state auditor. Instead, I was looking at our example from the American Library Association, where in several instances, most recently, I believe in 2018, they conducted and the board approved this, a review of themselves, a governance review, governance audit. I believe that could be very helpful, especially in light of recent events in the area of governance. And I'll conclude with a quote I thought was kind of cute. I think it's applicable for many parts of our society. It's from Poor Richard's Almanac by Ben Franklin. Don't burn down my house to roast your eggs. Thank you for listening.
I'm sorry, I didn't get to hear what you said. Don't burn down my house to what?
To roast your eggs.
Lynn?
Lynn Baker.
Lynn?
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Spoke too quietly.
I'm Lynn Baker. I've lived in Independence for a very long time and I love this city. I've been an educator for over 50 years. I'm a clinical social worker, licensed for 25 years. When I heard that the Mid-Continent Library System was questioning the need of their full tax levy assessment, which was approved by the voters in 2016, I was stunned. The public library is one of the safest and most welcoming places where people can meet. Also, I thought of the many uses the library could serve in each community, which could have a great impact on problems that affect us all. Society is caught in a whirlwind with many social and cultural problems, including the education of our children. Research from publications such as the ones I have with me, Education Week, September 13th, 2022, tells us the pandemic was a disaster for K through 12 schools on almost all fronts, from academics to mental health. The report from this document warns us there are significant holes in our understanding of how the pandemic has affected various groups of students, especially those who are typically most likely to fall through the cracks in the American education system. The report concluded that the pace of recovery is not adequate, and at its current speed, students of all races and income levels will graduate high school in the coming years ill-prepared for college and careers. The library can be used as a gathering place where tutoring of these needy students can be accomplished. I understand our librarians and employees are not teachers. However, there are many other volunteer groups which can be used to accommodate the tutoring for students. In conclusion, I want to make these points. Once a tax is allowed to decrease, the question for needing that increase in the future for revenue will be forever questioned. As we have one of the finest systems of libraries in this country, please think about what we have in our city, extended city, before you hobble our system. Are our workers fairly compensated for their time and education level and workload? I have heard from people who have used to work and lately worked at Mid-Continent Library that they are working on increasing their part-time staff in lieu of paying professional full-time workers the benefits and salaries they deserve. As I understand, Mid-Continent isn't at the competitive level with other library systems in the greater Kansas City area. I did not research that, but I did talk to former employees. 3, we have exciting opportunities to enhance the education of our children. I have devised a plan where tutoring can take place with a minimum of cost to the library and of no cost to the child or their family. Let's make our Mid-Continent Library System, which has branches in every community, let's make this a great institution, a place where additional learning can occur, a place where new ideas can take place and flourish and become ever more valuable as a community asset. Please do not allow this levy decrease to take place. Thank you very much.
If you wanted to leave those, if you wanted to leave those the copies you had as part of the record, you certainly may.
Oh, thank you. Who will I give them to?
Teresa is our secretary.
Thank you.
And they'll become part of the
That's
record.
great. Thank you so much for allowing me to do that.
Sure.
Courtney Pace.
Courtney. Sue glasses. Courtney.
She's not.
Okay, Julia. Julia Ryder. You're not here either. Okay, those are the ones who had went through the process to speak. So Teresa, time-wise, we're doing okay?
Yeah, we're fine. It's fine.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to add a few comments. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
So I can be a bit of a hothead, but this is an important issue for me. I need to let you all know that I'm a licensed mental health therapist, and I worked 20 years as a school counselor in Kansas City. My last 10 years were at Lincoln College Prep, which is recognized as one of the best schools in Missouri and in the nation. I'm used to diversity. Okay. I'm not from Kansas City, but I understand that Kansas City schools were integrated in the 1970s, 1980s, something like that. Prior to that, Lincoln was a school for the children of Buffalo soldiers, freed slaves, et cetera, et cetera. It was around since before actually Lincoln was assassinated. Proud of that school. Diversity worked there. And people, even today, I maintain contact with many students that have graduated and gone. One kid's in medical school, another kid's at Harvard. They test into that school. They have to maintain a GPA. So what I've seen is what my social work colleague has seen. Okay. I retired from the district at the beginning of the pandemic, and it was bad news. It was bad news. A lot of kids didn't have internet. They depended on, if they were lucky, to get hotspots, which barely worked. I'd go into a class online on Zoom. I'd see the teacher, maybe one other kid, and myself. My desire to make contact with these kids and to assess where they were, how they were doing. Pandemic has really screwed some things up or worsened trends that have already been going on. Our suicide rates, at one point we thought they were down, they're up again. We all know about violence. So for me, the library, the school, and other community assets are hand in hand. I cannot see cutting this asset out. I cannot see it. I can't, just like I can't see cutting out services at schools for kids that are hurt or hurting. Just like I can't see cutting out service for adults that have been challenged by the pandemic. Please do not cut this levy.
Is there an opportunity to speak even though I didn't sign up?
We have some bylaw policies. Let me ask our lawyer here.
I understand you have a few minutes left in your 30-minute time allotment for public speaking. So if it is okay with the board, I think it's okay to allow someone who has not signed up to speak.
Thank you. Yeah, no objection.
Okay, thank you. My name is Justin Ferguson. I live here in Independence. I didn't plan to come here and speak. I wanted to come here and just simply get more involved in the library board's activities. But I thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak, unlike our school board, which would not have. I am currently in a debate with our school board right now regarding banning books and their policies surrounding banning books for merely acknowledging the existence of trans or non-binary human beings. And I am very opposed to their policy. But one of the things, when I heard about this discussion at the library board, one of the things that really threw me is that our school district's fallback for saying, we're banning this, we're taking this book out of our libraries, which is happening all over the district, not just this one book, but all over the district due to the state laws, which I'm sure you're familiar with, which were recently passed, is it's still available in the public library. And so when we start talking about cutting funding that has already been approved by the voters for the public library, I find that to be a really, it's constructive removal of resources for these already at-risk students, already at-risk families in our area. And so these students are ones who, simply seeing the fact that there are other people like them out there in the world, are, because they don't see that often enough, they are at much higher risk of suicide and other negative impacts for their lives and their families' lives and their communities' lives. And so if we start talking about removing resources or cutting funding to the library simply because the library, for some reason, feels that it doesn't want to use all the money that voters gave it, it's a terrible precedent to set, and it's a constructive removal of these resources from these children's and these families' lives. And so I'm simply asking you to vote against giving back part of the levy for that reason.
Could I say something else?
2 minutes.
I'm sorry. I can't hurry.
2 minutes.
I was one of 5 children.
Can you introduce yourself, ma'am, please?
Pardon?
Can you introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Beverly Powell, and I spoke earlier. I am one of the 5 children. My best memories of childhood in the summer were the weekly or trips to the library. Now, I was raised in what would today be a low middle income family. Out of that family, we have 5 college graduates. We have an engineer and 3 accountants. Well, actually 4 accountants. 1 didn't finish the degree. I stand here today to tell you I would not have finished a degree in college. I would not have owned my own business. I would not be anything I am today if it weren't for the access that I had to public libraries. And Mid-Continent has a great deal to be proud of. We have an excellent system, and it's a crime. It is literally a crime to not use taxpayer intended use of that money. To cut the levy when we voted as taxpayers that it was worth the price to us. 60% of us voted that. It's wrong. It is just morally and ethically wrong.
I think we've got our 30 minutes, so thank you all for coming and sharing your thoughts. It is appreciated. In fact, it's the bylaws of the organization, the library do provide for visitor entry, basic advantage of it. That's why it's here. And it's good once all have fresh faces in the room too. So again, thank you for being here. So next matters, awards and recognitions. Are there any?
We don't have any awards, but if you want to introduce Bill more.
Oh, sure. Bill is our new lawyer, replacing Phil, who's been here for many, many years, many decades. And Bill, can you just introduce yourself, please?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So again, my name is Bill Moore. I'm an attorney with law firm of Rouse, Fretz, White Goss, Gentile Road. Our offices are located in Kansas City, Missouri. Pleased to be here and pleased to have been selected for the new attorney. It's obviously a wonderful organization. My experience, my background is in public law. At the present time, I do a lot of work for a variety of governmental entities. In a previous lifetime, I was city attorney for the city of Independence for a little over 15 years and represented them in other capacities for about another 5 or 6 years. So I thoroughly enjoy public law and looking forward to working with you all in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Besides being a lawyer, Bill also has a graduate degrees in the areas of the whole area of municipal law, where there's a lot of administrative law. So it's a great credentials match for the library. So again, welcome aboard.
Thank
you. Financial reports. And acceptance of our annual audit. So
I'll just take a brief second to introduce Michael Keenan. Michael is the audit manager for with Hood and Associates. Hood is the successor firm in the merger with Cochran and Vick.
Cochran and Vick, yes.
And he has been associated with the library for well over 10 years. Cochran has done the audit since 2008, I think he said.
I believe so.
So he is here to present the findings and the communications to the board. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Michael Keenan. I'm with the accounting firm of Hood and Associates, here to present the results of the financial audit for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2022. Included in your packets would have been the annual comprehensive financial report, as well as the required communications to management. And I've included a little PowerPoint presentation that I'll go over and then try to answer any questions that you may have. Again, a little bit about Hood and Associates. Again, we were formerly known as Cochran and Vick and Company. We were acquired by Hood and Associates in December of 2021. And the Hood and Associates kept all of the offices of Cochran and Vick and Company, as well as the personnel. With Hood and Associates, we have now served Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. We also go what's called a peer review, where that's an outside auditing firm will come in and review our quality control standards. And we're pleased to report that we have been awarded the highest rating as a result of that review. We're members of the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, that's the ICPA. We're also a member of the ICPA Government Audit Quality Center. And one member, what happens to be me, is a reviewer for the Government Finance Officers Association's participation and the achievement of special awards. And again, we're licensed to practice in Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. The scope of the audit, again, is the audit of the annual comprehensive financial statements for the Consolidated Library District, known as Mid-Continent Public Library, for the year ended June 30, 2022. It should be noted that staff intends to submit the annual comprehensive report to the Government Finance Officers Association for participation in the achievement and excellence in financial reporting. The library has first started this program in 2011 and has received that award of excellence in financial reporting every year since then. And we believe that this forthcoming June 30, 2022 report will also qualify for that award. Our responsibilities as the auditors is to conduct our audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards, as well as government auditing standards. We're also responsible to plan and perform our audit to obtain reasonable assurance, but not absolute assurance that basic financial statements are free of material misstatement. Again, what that means is we take the risk-based approach and we make selections of transactions, but we do not audit all transactions. Therefore, we can't give absolute assurance. We're also responsible to report on internal controls, as well as compliance with laws and regulations. The Auditing Standards Board of the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, the AICPA, recommend that we communicate these matters to the governing board. Illegal acts, none came to our attention as a result of performing our audit procedures. Changes in significant accounting policies. For 2022, there were no significant changes in accounting policies. Pleased to report, we had no difficulties or disagreements with management. We had full cooperation and access to the books and records. Page 5, a financial and compliant audit really addresses three basic questions. Question number 1, are the basic financial statements free of material misstatement? Again, we have issued an unmodified opinion that indeed the financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects. That's commonly referred to as a clean opinion. Again, that's the highest level of opinion that we can offer on external financial statements. Second question, are internal controls over financial reporting adequately designed and operating effectively? Our response to that is we did not identify any deficiencies related to internal controls over financial reporting that we consider to be a material weakness. Again, had we done so, we are required by our professional standards to report those matters to the governing board. On the last question, did the library comply in all material respects with finance-related laws and regulations? The results of our testing disclose no instances of non-compliance or other matters that we are required to report. On page 6, the management letter comments containing best practices and possible improvements. Again, our first comment relates to future accounting pronouncements. The Government Accounting Standard Boards continues to put out new pronouncements. It seems like every couple of months there's something new. And looking at the future pronouncements, the one that was going to have an impact on the library's financial statement and position is called GASB number 87. It deals with leases. And in summary, what that does is if the library has an operating lease, for instance, they have a building that they lease, under the new pronouncements, that will come on as a right to use asset, and that will be depreciated or amortized. The library will also report a right to use liability. So in essence, the standards are taking away operating leases and forcing all governments, as well as the private sector, to report these leasing activities as really a financing lease. On prior year comments to follow up, we did have a comment related to budget. There was a overage on the budget. We did not find those issues that occurred again in 2022. We had a recommendation of the best practices looking at your cybersecurity. Again, that's really relevant in the current day and age. I think the library is doing a good job, and again, we recommend that they always be aware of cybersecurity risks and also future accounting pronouncements. And a little summary on financial results. Again, on page 7, looking at the library's assets, deferred outflows, deferred inflows, and resulting net position. The library's net position is $149.7 million. That net position increased $8 million from the prior year's revenues exceeded expenses. That amount was 7.1 in 2021. If we go to the next page, again, this is just a snippet from page 11 in your financial statements. I really encourage everybody to read the management discussion and analysis, which is the first part of the financial statements. It gives an overall effect of the changes in comparing last year to this year. Also, read the financial statements and notes to those financial statements. That will give you a better understanding, if you don't have one already, of what is reported and the liabilities that the library has related to pension and other items. Again, for looking at the most significant government-wide obligation for the library is the 2018 certificates of participation. The outstanding balance as of June 30, 2022 was $58.7 million. Also at June 30, 2022, the library reported a net pension asset that deals with your loggers of 19 million. This was compared to net pension liability of 3.6 million. Again, those assets are held by the pension trust, and they're not available for the library, but they have to be reported for financial reporting purposes. But that net big change in that net asset was offset by what's called deferred inflows and deferred outflows. In essence, the pension plan for the library had a lot of investment earnings this past year that we're looking at. And so they recognize those for plan assets, but they defer those results over a number to smooth out the effect. So 1 year doesn't increase your the change in that. On page 9, looking at the general fund. Again, the general fund revenues exceeded expenditures before transfers out of a little over 6.2 million. The transfers out to the capital projects fund totaled 1,035,000 as approved by the board. The general fund balance increased 5.2 million for the year ended June 30, 2022, resulting in an ending fund balance of approximately 35.1 million. That unassigned fund balance is approximately 57% of the FY 22-23 general fund expenditure budget. And if you look down the following page, is page 10 of the PDF, of the PowerPoint. That's page 15 of your financial statements that summarizes the revenues and expenditures and the changes in fund balance as of June 30, 2022. And who this also, I've neglected to introduce you to Ralph Johnson, who an associate assisted with this engagement. You want to stand up, Ralph? And we appreciate that. Thank you, Ralph. I apologize, it was on my things. But I certainly thank Ralph and his personnel that assisted on this engagement. And we appreciate the opportunity to serve as Mid-Continent Public Library's auditors. That concludes my presentation. Are there any questions that I might be able to respond to?
Michael, at the meeting of the Finance Committee, which preceded this meeting, I asked you a number of questions about this audit to compare it to other audits that you do. I believe I asked you how many audits did you do of organizations like ours over the course of the year, and how you would compare us to those organizations in terms of clarity of the budget, in terms of the findings, so on. So would you undertake that response again?
I recall that question. And I think my response is going to be the same. We don't, I do approximately 20 different governments, large and small, throughout the metro. And one thing I won't do is rate and compare organizations against each other. The audit report speaks for itself. So looking at these financial statements, we did not propose any journal entries from the trial balance that was originally brought to us. So that tells you something. And other organizations, we at times will have to make a lot of journal entries to their books. And when that's the case, especially if they're material journal entries, then we need to report a material weakness, and we report that to the governing body. In this case, we did not report that. So I think based on the nature of the report versus other reports, I think if I answer your question on how well staff does. And very professional and good to work with, I must say.
So you're in your audits with other institutions, how would you, I know you don't want to rate this compared to others, but in a general order of things, where would you put the quality of the financial work that you audited here compared to the other 20 or so audits that you
I would say, and Matt, I would compare from a percentage standpoint, they're in the higher percentage of our total auditees. Again, a lot goes by the quality of the main finance person, the education, experience, and a lot of other factors go into that. But again, our report indicated no material weaknesses. We didn't report any. So I think that is the answer that I'll stick with.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Michael, just to confirm, are any of your services involved with the formulation of budget?
We do not get involved in the formulation of budget. Again, financial audit as we're doing, we're coming in and it's after the fact, if you will. We're reporting on your financial statements as of your year end or a period. Certainly we compare actual amounts to your budget, but we don't get involved in establishing budgets or anything like that. Anything that could be considered to be management function, like related to budget, would impair our independence. So we couldn't be the auditors of this organization. So that's why we don't get involved in anything like that.
More questions?
Need to move to the.
Did you have a question?
No, I mean, if we approve this, I just hope this would go up on our website. That's just a request on my part.
So does the motion need to be put up? Or?
Yeah. Cody, will you go back to the slide with the motion? Thank you. You need to.
So the motion to the board is to approve a recommendation from the Finance and Audit Committee to the full board to accept the 21-22 annual comprehensive financial report and audit as presented. So that comes from the committee, so it does not require a second.
Any discussion? If it's not, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Well, in closing, I certainly want to thank Susan and Juan and all of the staff of the library for assisting us in our engagement. High quality, very professional, and really great to work with. So that's always positive. So we thank you for that. And again, Ralph, thank you.
Thank you.
And I will say in closing, if you do have a question at some time later on, you can get my contact information from Juan. Call me, email me. I'll be more than happy to respond to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
Okay. Page one shows the amount of tax revenue we have received in July and August. We received $637 million, which is about $200,000 more than last year's. Also, the total operating revenue is $831,067. Page two is the operating expenditures. For payroll and benefits, it's over $5.4 million, close to 16% of the budget. The library materials is over $2.3 million, over 19% of the budget. The operational accounts, all of them, is about $1.3 million, 12% of the budget. Next page is the assessment. We have received the final assessment from all three counties. For Jackson County, it's over $9.5 billion, 6% over last year's number. Clay County
is close to $5.4 billion, 7% more than last year's number. And Platte County is close to $3.3 billion, 4% more than last year. Add them up, it's $18.2 billion, 6% more than last year's assessment. New construction dropped 10%. It's below $300 million. TIF also dropped 7%. It's a little over $600 million. The calculated tax rate still the same as last year, 34 cents, 34.68 cents. Also, not on that report, I also look at the impact of tax abatement on the library. Based on the 2021 abatements, the impact is about $4 million. Next page is the debt service fund. That's a summary of the certificates of participations. At the end of the fiscal year, the debt balance is $58.7 million. The early payoff is in March 2026 for about close to $44 million. Next page is the capital project fund. That's a list of all the capital projects. Storage Center, not being approved yet, but we proposed a $54,150 for the new fiscal year. Reading Rocket, the budget is $340,650. Half of that amount was paid last year. We haven't spent anything yet for this year. We also budgeted part of the proposed budget. There was a $77,000 for security cameras at Woodneath. New Riverside branch, the net expenses for in current year's proposed budget is $1.5 million. We sold the Riverside branch for $2 million. Received a new land valued at $650,000, and also plus a cash $1,350,000. For capital improvement plan, we spent about $670,814 in July and August. The budget is over $18 million. Next page is the health insurance fund. The total amount of contributions from both employer and employees is a little over $600,000 in July and August. About 10% is employees' contribution. The fixed costs and the fees is a little over $200,000. And the medical claims is about $347,000. The fund reserve at the end of August is about 1.3. That's my report for the month. And also in your board pack, there are two new reports. On page 26, the general fund budget versus actual reports, the format has been changed. It shows a monthly budget and a monthly expenses. Also, on page 37, there is a new report called All Payments Over $1,000 for July and August. That's one report for the month.
Can I just ask one question?
Yeah.
So for this, so this is just 2 months into the fiscal year, and so that 600,000, it's just 2 months out of, correct?
Yes.
Just wanted to confirm.
The right column, the budget on the health insurance fund, it shows a negative number. I'm wanting some clarification. Is
Yes,
that a point of concern? What should I make of that?
at the bottom of my report, it shows the minimum fund balance, fund reserve required, and the maximum allowed. Right now, at the end of August, the fund reserve close to the maximum amount allowed. And so for current year's budget, we reduced employers' contribution. So, yeah, under the proposed budget had a $600,000 deficit. We reduced the fund balance at the end of the fiscal year.
So is it a reasonable conclusion to say that the health insurance fund is underfunded?
It's kind of overfunded.
Okay, all right, that's the explanation.
Yeah, we're holding too much.
Okay, that's the explanation I was wanting or needing. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Proceed.
Okay. So our kind of statistics is, here he is. You're up.
Will you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Jim Staley. I'm the Community Relations and Planning Director. I was hoping somebody would play me some intro music when I came back there, but okay. Good evening, everybody. We do it quarterly just to catch everybody back up to speed, and for you folks who are in the room as guests, we do a quarterly report on library statistics, and that quarterly report focuses on our strategic plan. I know there's talk about a future strategic plan on the agenda later, so I'll try to highlight a few things as we go through here. For those of you, kind of preliminarily, for those of you who have been around a little while, you know, these are, usually it's Katina standing up here talking to you all. Katina, I think most of you know, has moved on from the library system. So I want to shout out to the planning department who put this report together. Aaron Kennedy's our strategic projects manager, and Tyler Keel is our new Katina. He is our data analyst. So together they put this all together for you. And we'll get them in here to do one of these.
He looks nothing like Katina, just so you know.
It's true. It's true. Okay, so can I get the next slide, please? Okay, so starting this, we go with our core measures. Okay, I do want to quickly, and I'm sorry, I'm going to walk in front here. Remember, this is the model for the current strategic plan. It starts with the pillars on the bottom. The pillars are the inputs. That's all the library work. You can see it says finance, communications, all that down there. Those are the things that we have to do well as a library system to be able to provide services, the baseline. Sitting on top of that is our core service. That's what we're talking about kind of in the first part of this. The core service is, you know, all those things that we do day in and day out. Our staff are providing a lot of service. That's what's there. And at the top are our 3 strategic priorities. And those are priorities. Those are elements of the core that have been lifted up, and they are focus. They're areas of focus for the system. And we got to those areas of focus by talking with our community back in 2018. So we did a series of public meetings. The public asked us to highlight those areas. We'll get to those. Okay, so back to core measures. Can I get the next slide? Okay, active customers. So, you know, one of the ways to talk about our health is how many people are using us as a system. And then there's some ancillary numbers. So can I get the next one, please? So here's our active customers. From an active cardholder standpoint, see, and one of the things I should preliminarily say is you're going to see a lot of increases in this. You know, obviously we're coming, the last fiscal year was a COVID year, this fiscal year, and this fiscal year really was the last fiscal. So 21, 22. So the fiscal year that ended in June. The one before that was even more heavily impacted by COVID. I think one of the things you'll start to see here is we're kind of getting back to normal. In this last fiscal year in particular, we were getting back to normal. The numbers were basically starting to look very similar to what they were pre-pandemic, and in some cases even increasing over that. So active cardholders, you can see a 15% increase up to 270, basically 272,000 users. An active cardholder, remember, is not just somebody with a card. There's way more of those folks. It means they have to have used it in the last 12 months. So that's always a rolling number. Okay. New card registrations, you can see, folks are coming into the system. That's a 35% increase in new card registrations. I'll talk about these two on the next slide, but market penetration and cardholder retention, you can see we ticked up a little bit. Those numbers still aren't quite where they were pre-pandemic, but you'll see this is one of the places where we can compare ourselves with other library systems, and you'll see how we compare in just a second. And then remember that with most of our 21 school districts, I think 17 of the 21 school districts, we have student accounts, and 63% of those cards are active, 2-point increase from the year before. All right, so can I get the next slide? Okay, so this is one of the places where we're able to compare ourselves with other libraries. So Savannah is our data vendor, and through them, we're able to compare ourselves in kind of these two categories with other libraries that are on their platform. So you can see on these charts, MCPL is in green, other libraries in our budget category are purple, same population category blue, and then Savannah wide. So everybody on the platform is in orange. We have always historically done very well in our percentage of active households, and that's been no change through the pandemic. What changed was that everybody went down. So we dropped from, this was over 50% prior to the pandemic, so we're inching our way back towards that. But then everybody else down here was up a little bit too. You might say that's great. I think staff would say we want all these other libraries to be up here with us, because what's good for other libraries is good for us too. Cardholder retention, you can see that was starting to look a little better for everyone. That number was up just about around, I think that one was up close to 60% prior to the pandemic. So we're sitting at 46, but you can see the steady climb kind of out of those pandemic months. Can I get the next slide, please? Okay, customer satisfaction. This is the other thing we want to do. We want to know, okay, people are using is, are they happy with the service they're getting? We use Net Promoter Score as our main measurement, but we do surveying outside of that as well. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so a refresher on Net Promoter Score. We ask one simple question: on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend others to use Mid-Continent Public Library? Say 9 or 10, you're a promoter. Say 6 or below, you're a detractor. We subtract the detractors from the promoters, and that's your Net Promoter Score. One of the reasons why we use this, and lots of other folks use this, is because it's something that works across industries. So can I get the next slide? We started at the very beginning of this plan with a Net Promoter Score of 91.8. We set a goal for ourselves of 92. Now, I know that doesn't sound like very much, but when you're up in the 90s, you're not moving very far. And so 21, 22, we were at 90.7. So we're falling a little short of our goal on this one. We've seen that number kind of hover back and forth sort of between 90 and the high 91s throughout the whole strategic plan. Sometimes it has to do with which libraries are open and closed. Obviously during COVID, we took a hit, because, some people wanted us to be more open, some people wanted us to be less open, and, all that was reflected.
Can I just ask a question about the baseline? Where did you get the baseline?
So we actually started surveying at the very beginning and took the initial, 6 months, I think, as a baseline score.
Okay.
And then set ourselves a goal over that. By way of comparison, other libraries, so libraries are very popular, right? We're not the only library that's popular. Your average library is in the mid-80s. So we're still doing well in comparison with other libraries. The average across all industries is the mid-40s. So libraries in general are very well thought of, and we are doing well. And I think that's a real testament to our staff members and the kind of service they're providing out in public every day. So get here, a little ancillary data here. This is about programming in particular, because that's the surveying we've done most recently. 96% of customers rated library programs they attended as excellent or very good. When you got down to the children's level, that ticked up to 99% of people surveyed said their library programs were excellent or very good. All right, can I get the next slide, please? Okay, customer transactions. This is sort of the last thing. Okay, so we know how many people are using us. We know whether they're happy with us. The other thing we want to know is what they're doing, right? And how much of it they're doing. So we look at a few things. Can I get the next slide? All right, so transactions. This number in the old days was just circulation. That's all, we measured how well we were doing by how many books were checked out. I think we all know at this point, a library has a ton of other activity going on inside of it besides just checking out books. So circulation is still the biggest number in here, but it is not the only number in here. So, we've rolled up Wi-Fi checkouts, and we've rolled up program attendance, and we've rolled up, a bunch of different things. They're all right there, but I know that's, for a lot of you, that's a long way away. So it's all in the strategic plan on the website. Okay, so in 2021, we were at 9.8 million transactions. We set a goal for 21-22 of 10.6 million. We set that goal at a time where we didn't know kind of when certain COVID restrictions were going to end. We were guessing. We also, we had some buildings opening and closing, and we tried to factor that in. We set a goal of 10.6. We actually had 11.9. So I'd say we undershot our goal a little bit. But this 11.9 is meaningful because it is essentially just straight equal with the last pre-pandemic year. So that is showing us coming right back out of it and, being able to serve our community in the same way we were doing previously. So that's a note about what I just said there. So 11.9 million, let's see the next slide. Here's a little context in there. So again, circulation, that old number, the one that matters, this is physical and digital. And you can see a 25% increase. The majority of that increase was in physical, but actually digital, even though we were coming out of the pandemic, still ticked up a little bit as well. You can see the one decrease you see here is in use of virtual resources. Some of those things people come in to get now. Some of those things, people were at home, doing certain kinds of research during the pandemic, and they may not be home doing quite as much anymore. Internet access, 100% basically doubled. That is uses of our public computers and uses of the Wi-Fi in the building. So whether you bring your own device in or use ours, you're counted there. Program attendance, that tripled basically. And the one thing about program attendance, we didn't really start programming until February of that fiscal year. So that number will continue to go up considerably. And then use of physical resources, you can see that one about doubled as well. That's things like meeting rooms, reference questions for the librarians, all those kinds of things you have to be in the branch to do. So it makes sense that that number kept going up. So again, we get down to total transactions there, and we're at 11.9 million, a 22% increase over the year before. So you can see busier.
The internet access, that doesn't include our Wi-Fi hotspots.
It does not include our Wi-Fi hotspot. We made a note to ourselves that we need to start including those. Right now, they're included in circulation because they check out. But I think, we're thinking we need to move them, but we need to be able to account for them in the right. We're still trying to figure out how to account for them, because if you come in and use our Wi-Fi one day, that's a Wi-Fi usage. But if you check one out, you've got it for, how long do you have it for?
41 days.
For 2 weeks, is that one use or 14 uses, or what is it? So we're gonna have to work on that and see, what the proper way to count is gonna be. Okay, can I have the next slide, please?
Before you go to the next slide, just a little fun fact on e-resources. Our vendor's Overdrive, and just so you know, we rank number 7 in the world as an Overdrive user. So that's not just in the United States, that's everywhere. That's the first time we've bumped into the top 10 ever. So a part of that's probably pandemic driven, but it's a really nice honor, and they celebrate, Overdrive celebrates us. Whenever we hit a milestone, they do let us know that.
Thank you. This is just by quarter. So the transactions, you can see the darkest green line here is this last year. So we're hovering right around 3 million, a couple under, a couple over, but kind of right in that 3 million transactions per quarter. Next slide, please. Okay, so that was the core stuff. Now we want to just hit a few highlights on the strategic priorities and keep going. So I didn't want to assume that everybody remembered what all the strategic priorities were. So strategic priority 1 says MCPL will cultivate literacy skills that prepare children and families for lifelong success. Can I get the next slide? So within strategic priority 1, we're looking at a couple things here. Children and teen summer library program participation. And you can see 12,500 kids participated in summer library program last year, which was, a 65% increase over the year before. That makes sense. The environment was changing. There actually are adults who participate in this as well. They're not counted in this number. We're specifically looking at children and teens. And then children's material circulation. I think what's interesting about this number is you see that's a 39% increase, which is a little higher than our overall circulation increase. The reason is because, like I said earlier, physical was coming back a little bit more than digital was increasing. And children's material circulation tends to be very predominantly physical items. Kids come in and they get books. So one other note is that we relaunched our Grow a Reader app back in January. That gives videos, books, and daily literacy tips to caregivers and their children. It's a practice that's been essential pre-reading skills. Part of our success measures for this priority was being able to make sure kids enter kindergarten ready to learn. Okay, can I get the next one? All right, strategic priority 2. MCPL will connect citizens to innovative services and resources that expand opportunity and build community. All right, next slide. One of the places where we've really focused in on this over the last several years is with small business and job resources. So one of the things we're looking at here is our Square One service. They are helping small business owners by doing one-on-one consultations. Last year, they did 370 of those, which was almost a doubling of what they did the year before. So that's 370 small business owners getting help from the library system. The other thing that is a really big thing that we do, which is about to change a little bit, but it's going to be kind of the same difference. Career Online High School, we had 21 graduates last year. That's 21 adults in our library district who didn't have high school diplomas, but got one through the library system. And it's not a GED, it's a real legit actual high school diploma. We do that in partnership with Literacy Kansas City and with the Kansas City Public Library. Okay, just a couple of ancillary things. This is programming again. 98, almost 99% of program participants with Square One said they developed new skills or knowledge, and 97, almost 98% of them rated their programs as very good or excellent. All right, only 2 more slides to go. Can I get the next one? Yeah, there we go. Okay, strategic priority 3. MCPL will build the capacity of individuals and organizations to create and share their stories. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so there's 2 main, we obviously do things in all the branches, but 2 main places where this work is carried out: the Story Center and the Midwest Genealogy Center. So you see the Story Center here is one of the few places where we saw some decreases year over year. One of the things that's important to know about the Story Center, I think you all know this, We opened the house this year and they moved. And they had a lull in their programming in the vicinity of moving. So that's why there's less programs on the docket. They also shifted back to doing they had been all virtual previously. And they were shifting back to doing some in-person in their new space. The Genealogy Center was kind of the reverse of that. You're seeing kind of the same increases you see other places, with more people coming to the center, more programs being held. There were also 23 storytelling certification program graduates. So one of the things they do at the Story Center is certify people in the art of storytelling. We had 23 folks graduate from that in the last fiscal year. And I just threw up a genealogy-based online resource sessions, 192,000 of those. Lots of people doing online resources. During the pandemic, some of our services allowed people to use the service from home as opposed to being able. So some of those you have to come into the library to use this remote service, because that's how our license agreement worked. And they opened up a lot of those for people to use at home during that period. All right, that's it. Any questions?
Yeah, just on the square one and the help with small business, is that likely to increase quite a bit this year because of Green Hills?
Well, that'll be a different, so it could. I mean, that's a different unit. So the Culinary Center there at Green Hills is actually, they're going to be their own group. And so some of the activity that Square One, Susan, hop in here anytime. Yeah.
They're going to work together and they'll work in conjunction, because Square One, as you know, does a lot of food-based programming and education. So they'll be partnering with the Culinary Center and referring people back and forth. So if they're working with a small business that is particularly food-based and they want to, they don't have enough money, or they haven't tested their concept enough to have a brick and mortar or even a food truck, they'll be able to use the incubator kitchens that are at Green Hills in order to do that. So there's going to be a lot of crossover and a lot of participation between the two groups.
Thank you.
Just a general comment that the 270,000 active card holders, in a way, it's, in my opinion, deceptive, because there are people such as myself who are card holders, and I don't check out a book. I use the magazines, which I thoroughly enjoy, but not enough to get a subscription on my own. And occasionally, the newspapers from out of town I might find some interest in. So there's a lot of traffic that doesn't end up checking out a book or getting on the internet, and which the 270 grand or 70,000 is probably very, very much on the shy side.
I have one question that I don't know if it's tracked with this thing, is like with our Story Center and the book binding machine, like, are we seeing how many times that's being used? Because I think that's such a very cool thing that we're offering. Do we have any stats on that?
Yeah, I don't have them currently, but it is something we keep. Yeah, we keep stats on all of those things.
Because I think that's really one of the most exciting things that we do. For those of you don't know, Whitney, there's a book machine that will print a book and put it in a binding. I think that's really cool. And I think that part of our story program, I'd really like to see it as part of this presentation, because I think it's something that we offer that's very unique to us. That's really cool.
Sure. Yeah. And there's kind of two different things there, right? There's people who come in to print whatever they might want to print. And there's also the books that we publish kind of in-house with the press. So there's kind of two elements.
Yeah, I mentioned you with that, there's a certification program for storytellers. There's a written program and an oral program. And for those who have the chance, there's a Buffalo Soldier group that reenact incredibly heroic soldiers that were in the cavalry that were in the upper Midwest primarily. And a lot of the actors in that program are graduates of the oral presentation program, as well as now one of them actually going on the faculty of the Story Center. So it's a very, very collaborative basis, and a lot of stuff too with the local history around the site of the Story Center in connection with Will and Jewell College. And it's a great resource. you, John.
Thanks.
All right. As a follow-up to that,
Susan is next.
we do every year we're required by the Missouri revised statutes, besides being required to do a financial audit, we have to produce an annual report and make sure that that is presented to the board and then passed on to each of our counties. You've just heard the report from Jim, but it is in a print format. Per state statutes, the board does need to approve this, and so that we can pass it on to the counties as required. So staff recommends that you approve the annual report, but feel free to ask questions. The market, Jim and his department do put this together. A lot of what he covered is in here, and then there's a little bit more information in here as well. Lori, you asked about the Woodney Press on page 5. There's a little blurb about it. It also gives you the library value calculator based on all of our statistical numbers, how much people, the entire district, how much they use the library and what the value is of that. There's a little bit more about strategic priority 1. The Grow Reader app is in here. There's a little bit of information on the Winter Reading Challenge. For those of you who know what that is, that runs January to March, and that is an adult reading program. And there's usually a theme. Last year it was horror. So if you're into horror, that was really good. Next year in January, it will be humor is going to be the theme. And all you have to do is read 5 books between March 15th or January 15th to March 15th, and you earn a mug. And I'll tell you right now, those mugs are prized possessions. So watch for that. Strategic priority 2, Jim talked about Career Online High School and the Square One small businesses, but we also launched a technology to go services, and it's talked about in this annual report as well. Kind of going backwards in the report. Heaven forbid I go front to back instead of back to front. And then a lot of the core services with the numbers that he gave you are also. So this is online. I don't know, are there copies in the branches to any extent?
Yes, we send copies out to the branches. It is online, and then we did not print these in-house, now we do. So here comes Dustin with some copies.
He's got copies for anyone who would like to see them. But the trustees should have them all at their places too. Except one.
It's nice to see your picture.
Thank you. And that was, they're like, you need to write something. Okay, I will. Brett.
Approval of the annual report.
I'll second.
Second, that we approve the annual report. Any discussion?
Thank you very much.
Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Or abstain.
Thanks.
Okay. So go to old business or unfinished business. I guess the first one is our selection committee. Since the last report, there's been continued great deal of effort with our search firm, certainly with Megan, our local counsel in this matter. The committee, in conjunction with Megan, had prepared a series of questions to be prepared and proposed to the candidates. And we had the first interview via Zoom application. And the course of the interviews was just that: questions from the committee to the candidate, and then questions from the candidate to the committee. And after that, there was a conferring with the principals of this firm, deliberations and some opinions regarding the candidates. The number of candidates considered was adjusted. A second set of interviews was conducted also by Zoom, and the same format of questions to the candidate, and the candidate had questions of the committee. And as of this point right now, again, with tremendous work from the search committee, certainly Teresa, Megan, our counsel, we're going to be conducting actual on-site interviews this week. And the general format will be a full day session in which there will be a breakfast meeting with key individual personnel of the executive level in the headquarters, then tours of the various branches and specialty sites like the genealogy center, certainly the story center, and then lunch here with the executive level here at headquarters and back out in the field and then an evening meal conference with the candidate. And that'd be the format that would be conducted for the persons being interviewed. To the extent any of the trustees are available to go to these, the meetings that is in your handout, to meet the candidates, I think that would be time very well spent. Again, your schedules permit. I think it'd be good, of course, to, first of all, get to know the person as a candidate, have a feel for that person before the selection committee has to go through its further work. And then offer, of course, your insights to the selection committee. So that's where we are right now. This week's going to be the on-site visits with the candidates, and after that, follow-up debriefing with our search firm people. And then we simply wait to see what will happen after that. Nothing can be scheduled until we go through this week. And if anybody else on the committee has something else that I omitted or want to correct, please. It's off. Okay, I guess we have no questions.
There's one item, try to be quick and brief. There is $55,000 of unbudgeted expenses associated with the Story Center, the historic house that's in there. The building committee reviewed this. I mean, the items are need some additional money for acoustic treatment, donor recognition, some fabric balances for the windows, a light fixture, and all this sort of comes up to basically 55. It's hard to read. Trust me, that's what it says up there on the screen. The most significant thing is that actually these items will be covered through grants and donations. So this doesn't come out of the operating budget. So this comes as a thank you. This comes as a recommendation from the building committee, and as such, no second is required. And that's what we hope to take action on.
Discussion or questions of Brent? Okay, we have a recommendation or a motion from the building committee to approve the amount of $55,000 presented on the board. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstain. Got it.
That's it.
Quick.
You know, if you're interested in the updates and building projects and all that, you know, I hang around afterwards. Jake's here, you know, but we, you know, it's in the material. Projects are going along well. So
Can I just ask, what is our target for the North Oak? Are we still on target?
North Oak, Jake.
What was your question?
When are we on target to open the new North Oak?
Probably sometime in the early, or I should say late winter of 2023. So first. No, sorry.
No,
Second quarter.
second quarter. Late spring.
Trying to be optimistic, but second quarter is actually a better estimate.
Yep. Okay. Finance committee met on September 8th, had a fairly long agenda. So I'm going to hit on a few of the things. The item 7.11 on your agenda pertains to the disbursement procedure RFQ. We, the board approved that previously. The RFQs came back and we received 4 responses. They were presented to the committee. We discussed them. This was made to go through an interview. Each of those parties, we had some varying fee proposals, and both Quan and really Quan primarily wasn't comfortable making a decision for this type of project simply based on a fee number and a submission. So we've completed 2 of the interviews. We have 2 of them scheduled for next week. We'll bring that back to the committee in October and to the full board. Hopefully, the time frame on that is assuming everything proceeds accordingly, is to do the project in November, December, and have the report at the earliest in January, but the latest by February's meetings. Any questions on that? Okay, so there's no vote required tonight on that. The next item on the agenda is the facility assessment capital plan RFQ. This was discussed at committee. This pertains to the what I'll call the, I don't know, for lack of a better label, the PropL capital expenditures. The budgeted amount is 113 million. It's moving towards 120 million, I think, in total with Riverside changes and some other things. To date, we do not have what I'll call a complete accounting of how the funds have been spent. Over 100 million has been spent to date. We have some differences in the presentations between the original plan of what I'll call the 17 and 18 presentations of the plan, what the dashboard shows and what the budget book has. Some of those schedules are not complete. But you know, those are mechanical issues that I hope can be easily rectified. The purpose of this is to really look at this as a special procedures project. This is not an audit per se, so we don't turn someone loose. It's to bring in an expert who has applicable expertise in the construction area. Could be financial people, could be project people, could be architects. We're going to have to do a search for that. And I, as explained to the committee, this would probably be at least a two-phase project. I would expect an initial assessment. Again, we're going to have to, once we make the selection of the expert or experts, we'll do an initial assessment, make some decisions about the type of things to be reviewed, the level of that review, and then we would approve that that next phase of the project. There could be a third phase, but that would be solely dependent on the findings, and I wouldn't expect that to happen, but that's a potential action to take down the road. The types of things that they may look at, and this is not intended to be all inclusive. This is just a list of things I wrote down. Obviously, the billings and the expenditures, contractual compliance, industry standard practices, and consistency of methods in terms of how they do things on project to project. This is not a budgeted item. We set a number that's fairly high.
Based on your numbers, that was the upper end of your range.
So we picked the highest so we would not have to come back to the board for additional approval. So the number was set at 60,000. I want to back up. The capital fund is obviously it's still in process. There were a few things that came out from some previous I guess presentations. One of the biggest ones I'd just like to mention a couple of things is that in the analysis of the capital assets, we're using the market value of the bonds. And because of the duration of the bonds in that account, we're down $1.6 million when you look at market value versus par. So because we hold those assets to maturity, we're not going to forego 1.6 million. We'll have that's 1.6 million. It's a timing issue. The other one is that the capital analysis not included interest income on that. There was $26 million in that account. And again, there's interest income, not as much as there would be if we could invest it today. But as those bonds mature, then that interest income obviously will either be in the capital account or it will move over to the general fund as the intercompany, what I'll call the interfund balances are paid. So there's more. The good thing is the analysis that was done in June that has some discrepancies in it. After I make these adjustments, it's not that far off from what the ending number was. So the motion before the board is to approve the recommendation from the Finance and Audit Committee to the full board for an RFQ to be prepared and released to engage an independent expert or experts and report upon agreed upon procedures for the purpose of analyzing and evaluating PropL capital expenditures with fees not to exceed $60,000.
Discussion, please.
Discussion time, okay, thank you. So I just have a question. So like whenever we're having a proposal for some of the buildings, this is an outside different from the board that reviews the proposals. So this is like an independent company that would come in and they're going to look at like, tell me exactly what they would be looking at.
I would characterize this somewhat like a financial statement audit, in that we're coming in on the backside to look at what was done. And how, I guess how the expenses were accumulated and paid and processed, whether they're industry standards. Again, I'm not a construction expert. I can tell you exactly everything they're going to look at. But we have no second review of this 100 million plus expenditures. Okay, if you think about a financial statement audit, Quan does the accounting, and we have a financial statement. We have an auditor comes in and expresses an opinion on the financial statements taken as a whole. This is for the purpose of because the board really has no means to evaluate how that money has been spent or whether it's been spent appropriately and in accordance with contract. That's what this project is intended to address.
Okay, I have a question based on that. So when we go out for an RFQ for a new building for something, don't we have them give us an exact amount?
We do. And in fact, under the librarian's report, Jake is going to talk about the entire process. We get a guaranteed maximum price, and that's done through the, and tell me if I'm wrong, Jake. It's through the J.E. Dunn, who's our construction manager at risk, plus our architects and all of their subcontracts. They go through and get all of those bids. If it comes over the budgeted amount, they and Jake work together to figure out how to get it down to that amount. Now, this last couple of projects, because of inflation and the cost of lumber and steel, et cetera, it's been a little trickier to make that happen. But we go through that, and then we get a guaranteed maximum price, which you guys all hear about. Once you pass that and agree to that guaranteed maximum price, if the project comes in over that amount, the construction company eats that overage. If it comes in under, we get that money back.
Right. And so the purpose of this, because I don't want to waste $60,000. I just think that we have some things in place that are already kind of like that. So that's what my question was, is kind of what will they do differently than what we've already kind of put in place? Because if it went over, I thought we had that piece in there that they have to pay for that.
Well, again, I'm gonna go back. We do not have an complete accounting of how the funds have been expended. Okay, we don't know how they've been expended relative to the original plan, how they've been expended by branch. We have a dashboard. Dashboard is incomplete. We have a schedule that was prepared on June 20th. That was provided to us on the evening before the board meeting. That schedule is incomplete. There's no mechanism for the board, no different than you rely on management to handle the financial statements. You don't have an oversight function, or you don't have a board mechanism to address whether these funds were expended. And while I'm not, this is not intended to make any statement of Jake or anyone else, but we have no way of knowing that those are the contracts or other things are being complied with. So it's really on behalf of the board and behalf of the public who approved these expenses back in 2016.
I think this comparison of about an hour ago, we just had our outside auditors come in and approved the really quite excellent work that Quan did. We do that year in and year out. And that's no way to suggest that anybody has less than total confidence in his staff. Okay, that's year in and year out. This is a multi-year project over $100 million. And what is imposed upon Quan has never been imposed upon $100 million of taxpayer resources that we took in.
I'd like to point out one thing. You keep mentioning the dashboard. The dashboard is not a financial document. It was never meant to be exactly lined up. It was just a cheat sheet with the building committee to kind of see, get a general idea where we are. So I think by trying to present that as a financial document is incorrect. And Brent, you can disagree with me, but
I'll speak to this. I mean, the building committee has talked about this. I just have the point of view that while I may agree with you, I think that this will remain a live issue until we have this outside independent review, of it. And we will find and learn. I've got confidence in what it is that we've done. We have done a very thorough job. We've kind of cost overruns, but there's this precision reconciliation, dollar for dollar and things like this, that in some sense is the only way that people will be satisfied with that degree of particularity. Also, sort of understand is that this is at the end of all this sort of project, and so if we find something, there's not a lot that would inform future projects because we're not going to be going down a new capital campaign. I'm cognizant of what it is that our auditors told us, and I recognize the limitations of what our auditors said, but they didn't find any, lack of internal controls or any material misrepresentation. But I'm here to tell you is that this issue has bounced around 4 or 5 or 6 different times within the board itself. And to the degree that we have fiduciary responsibilities as a trustee, this is an investment in seeing if we're fulfilling our fiduciary, trustee responsibilities. And that's why I will be voting for it.
I see. Thank you. And I know that, I think you mentioned it, Mark, that's kind of something that you wanted to see was an audit. So I appreciate that. Okay, thank you.
I'm also mindful if you spend $60,000, they're not going to come back and say, gosh, it's all lovely and peachy keen. They will come back and say, well, there's this or there's that, and we will learn.
Like this auditor came back and said it was all peachy keen. So
well,
I'd like to hear that.
Well,
the fee issue was set that 60,000
is
a high number. And again, we're going to do a phase 1. I'm not going to throw numbers because I'm not going to speak for the experts, but there'll be a phase 1 initial review and a phase 2. And hopefully at the end of phase 2, they tell us everything is fine. If we get into a phase 3, there's problems. My guess, that's what I would guess. So, but again, I'm not going to speak for them. So, but again, and just regarding the dashboard, if the dashboard is not an accounting, we don't have an accounting of funds if the dashboard is not serve that purpose.
I would represent it as a sound investment and confidence in our expenditures.
I appreciate that.
Any other discussion? May I answer Lori back?
No.
Oh, okay. Other comments, questions, discussion? Okay, we received a motion that doesn't require a second from the committee. So all in favor of approving the finance assessment and capital fund RFQ, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, abstaining? It's passed.
Okay, moving along to 7.13, which is the levy certification. You can see the motion on the board. Can we flip to the next? Thank you. I just wanted to briefly.
We have people online who may be listening on the phone. Can you please read the motion so that?
Oh, okay, sure. I'm going to read them at the end. Is that okay? I'd like to give the background information before the motions get made. That's all right.
I'm going to say it's difficult for people to know what they're talking about.
The topic is the levy certification. I'm going to give a background just on the calendar process for the levy, some of the statutory issues that pertain to a voluntary levy reduction, and then I'm going to talk about the financial, as you had on board docs and have in front of you, the financial analysis and projection that largely was prepared by Quan and done in cooperation with me. And then I will talk about the budget adjustment, and then I will present the 2 motions, even though they're separate motions. So I can read those at the front. What is the preference?
You need to do the levy certification first, and then you move into reduction because they're two different things.
All right. So the motion from the committee is approval and recommendation from the Finance and Audit Committee to the full board to certify the library's operating levy at 0.3240 for this current fiscal year, a decrease of 0.0228. Okay, can you flip to the next? Okay, so just briefly touch on the levy process. For those of you who may not be familiar, the library has historically had a budget and levy hearing in the month of June. That is a voluntary act; it's not required. Once the budget has been put together, obviously. Those are based on estimates for revenues. Quan receives the initial, what's called the pre-BOE, which is Board of Equalization assessments from each county. Over the next 30 days, hopefully those counties complete their BOE hearings, and in early August, not always early August, because Clay County was late, those post-BOE assessments come in from the county clerks. That then proceeds to preparing a final levy calculations with final revenue estimates. The levy calculation is then brought to the board, the finance committee and the board. Quan has the option of going to the state auditor's office for a validation of its calculation, and that results then in the final levy. The county clerk, I just note out that September 30 is a drop dead date. So we have to have postmarked the documents that are sent to the county clerk by September 30th to all three counties. They then submit those to the state auditor's office, and then it gets returned to us as well. So that's timeline that has to be followed. Again, the September 30th is the drop dead date for when this has to be done. Okay, so I don't have a slide on this next piece. There's a statutory maximum levy. I was pointing out that the 40 cents that was approved by voters in 2016 is a maximum levy, but that is subject to Hancock adjustment. And I don't believe, Quan, that the 40 cents was ever levied. I think it was adjusted in the first year. So if you look at the history, it dropped down to 39 and went on down from there. So the current levy of 3,468 is the statutory maximum. Right. So that is if we take the full amount that the tax auditor, state tax auditor allows, it would be the 3,468. Okay. If we do a voluntary levy, it goes into effect for 2 years. Okay. And a voluntary reduction taken in a non-assessment year, which is the even numbered years. The assessment years are the odd numbered years. So 2023 will be the reassessment year. So taking a voluntary reduction in a non-assessment year results in a reduced tax rate ceiling during the following reassessment year. So again, we're locked in for 2 years. The voluntary rate is subject to Hancock adjustments, meaning it can go up and it can go down. So the assessed values go down, the levy rate goes up. The intent of that is to maintain revenues for the taxing district, okay, or the taxing entity. If there is a Hancock affected reduction in the second year, that is not considered a voluntary reduction. Okay. So if that voluntary levy is approved, it can be undone in any subsequent even numbered year. It doesn't have to be in the next subsequent even numbered year, which would be 2024. It can be done in 24. It can be done in 26, 128, whatever. But again, it's a 2-year commitment. Okay. To go back to what I'll call the statutory or another levy, in a subsequent even numbered year, the taxing authority must, 1, conduct a public hearing, and 2nd, adopt a resolution justifying the action. Okay. So there's no requirement for a public vote. There's no requirement. It's strictly a board action and a public hearing to take that would require action 2 years from now. Okay. Make sense? Okay, if you have in front of you a one-page financial analysis, we can flip to that. Make it a little bigger. Thank you. Okay, there is a new version. Hopefully you've got it, at least the one printed in front of you is a newer version of what was up there yesterday. All I did was add lines on the right side. Just to give you some background on how this was developed, I asked Quan to put together a 3-year projection. So you see what I'll call the yellow columns. Those are Quan's growth assumptions as to assessed values. Those are his expense projections. Obviously, that has not gone through the typical budgeting process, but that takes into consideration the changes in the branch costs, branch activities, reopenings, et cetera. So the components of that projection, which you don't see, it's behind the scenes on here, includes the assessed values by county. There are things called non-local taxes, such as railroads and some other components. There are back taxes that are always collected, delinquent taxes, taxes paid under protest, those come in over time, and those can come in over a number of years. Obviously, the operating costs and the debt payments, those are the key costs coming in, okay? Then we proceeded to evaluate the current method for other elements. And those elements include allocating capital funds as part of the initial budget, okay? Historically, and with the exception of 2018 and 2020, funding for capital costs was through the excess operating revenues after the end of the fiscal year, okay? I'm going to refer those numbers again later. In addition, for the general fund, there's a small bond market value adjustment. Again, this is a mark because the GASB rules require the investments to be carried at or to be reported at market value. That 41,000 is the difference between the market value and the par. The operating fund has very short-term investments. They all mature within 3 to 4 months of the June fiscal year end. So those will all be reinvested at much higher rates. And then there is additional income, obviously, as I just mentioned, because of the market value changes in rates. Those operating funds, which were earning probably in the range of 10 to 20 basis points, will be reinvested in the range of 300 plus because 5-year rate, or I saw 1-year treasuries today hit 4%. Okay, so the levy approach should be a process designed to cover all costs while providing sufficient surplus in both the general fund and the capital fund, okay? And again, historically, the levy was set to secure the maximum fund. So the 3468 is the statutory maximum. If that was imposed, that would be the maximum revenues into the library, okay? Capital costs were not always initially factored into the budgeted, and they weren't factored in specifically in the budget. I'm going to make that point. They came through on the back end through the excess revenues over expenses. Okay, so the calculation of the load of the levy includes loads and estimates for operating expenses, which you see, debt service payments, which are annual, and we have a 20-year debt service schedule that goes through 2000. What is it? 38? Quan? Yeah.
2038.
Obviously, the capital costs. There are some estimates in here for the collection percentages because we don't collect 100% of the taxes that are assessed. Again, back taxes and other taxes come in over time, and there are some other miscellaneous revenues that offset some of these costs. So when you look at those and you net all the components, you get to the net amount that has to be required from assessments and from, in essence, current collections. So in this process, we looked at some different scenarios. We tested just kind of see what, best case, worst case was. You never want to put in an overly optimistic case. nor do you want to plan around the most, the most dire case. So these are presented as a realistic approach, Quan's assumptions, which are reasonable assumptions. The green columns are dialed down in terms of that growth, just in case the assessment growth does not occur. So then it became a process of evaluating where we stood after these components were included and where we had surplus available. You will see on line number 3 that we have no capital plan funding for the current year because the capital plan is I understand, fully funded for all the projects that are on the table. We do have on line 4 what is called a maintenance reserve funding. This is something in discussion with the building committee that will be presented in the course of the next fiscal year. There's nothing budgeted for the current year, but obviously because you have new buildings that are completed, you shouldn't have a lot of maintenance, we hope. But there will be funding, there will be maintenance required for all the buildings, whether that be HVAC units, roof, parking lots, carpet, whatever the case may be. That will all come out of that, what I'll call the maintenance capital fund, okay? And that will be built up over time. And then you have on line 5, the debt service. So I want to go back up on line 1 is the projected operating expenses. You can see the current fiscal year, the columns in the yellow have the most recent 3 fiscal years combined, which is about 151 million. The current fiscal year, the initial budget was 57.1 million, and you can see the projected budgets going forward, 59.4 and 61.1 million. Okay. Those same numbers are used on, really all the same numbers are used on both sets, so both scenarios. The only difference you'll see is on line 8, because of the assessed values being dialed down a bit. You'll see that the fiscal 24 and 25 years bring in about $2 million less each year for taxes. So on a 3-year projected basis, the Quan's projection is 186.4. The modified growth is 182.5, so about $4 million variance there. Other than that, the components are the same. Okay, when we look at, and you'll see down on line 13 where the excess of revenue based on these assumptions we have in here, there is an excess of revenue over expenses for those years. The third year is unknown. And again, that will be a reassessment year because the levy is a 2-year commitment. Right? But I went out that far just to get an idea of where things might land. On line 16 and down, you'll see the budget reconciliation. You'll see where we've added in the bond market value adjustment to 41,000, and then the investment income adjustment was calculated at the time that calculation was done in early September. We did not change it. I would expect it could be higher, but I can't predict interest rates 2-3 years from now. So we just left the number the same for each of those years. So you'll see that the calculated ending surplus in these scenarios is in excess of $36 million and $38 million for the second 2 years. And again, I'm looking at the yellow columns on an analysis. You'll see some lower numbers in the third year of what's called the modified projection. The line 21 is what I labeled the required surplus, okay? The calculation we applied here is 45% of current operating expenses plus the next year's debt payment. The current policy of the board is for 20 to 50% of the next year's operating expenses. So just using round numbers, that would be in the range of $30 to $31 million. You can see that we're well in excess of that under this scenario, under both of these scenarios. I would point out that the with this, and this is based on the reduced levy, that we still have excess over and above what the calculation is. So even at the end of the second year, we're 5.9 million over what the required surplus would be, and 5.3 million at the end of the third year. In the box at the bottom, if we plugged in the current statutory maximum levy of 3,468, you'll see that that would produce an $18 million excess, okay, over the 3-year period, and using the 0.3240 yields the 5.3 million excess. Okay, so again, that's an excess over what the statutory or what the board over the calculation, but still in excess of the board policy maximum.
I have a question before you move on.
Sure.
If I may ask.
Sure.
I'm not sure why capital plan funding is left out of this completely. We still have three projects we haven't broken ground on, and 2 that we haven't even gotten a guaranteed maximum price. I would think that somewhere in here should be reflected how much we budgeted for those items, so that we can make sure that when those guaranteed maximum prices come in, that we're able to meet them and get these past projects completed.
Okay.
You can explain that to me.
The analysis that was done in June, okay, that included all the projects that I believe you're
But it's not reflected in here. It is part of the budget still.
This is the operating budget. Okay. The capital fund, there was no allocation to the capital fund because the capital fund is fully funded. Okay. And this is based on the report that was put together on June 20th. Okay. And again, there was just short of $25 million of capital funds available.
That's if those projects come in as we anticipate.
As far as I know, nothing has changed. Okay, there's 2 things. Nothing has changed, and we'll have $38 million of surplus.
So in this, we're basically just looking at operating funds, and you've taken out the funding for the capital plan from all this.
Well, again, there are 2 pieces of the capital plan. One is for the construction, what I'll call the Prop L construction. And that's the piece, that's the dashboard. Okay, that's this schedule here. And whether it's a tracking tool, it's the only accounting tool that was made available that I could find. Okay. And then this schedule here that was sent out to the board on the evening before the June board meeting. Okay. There was short of 25 million at the end of June. It includes all the budgeted expenditures as well as completion of Riverside. It has the GM, I think that was supposed to be Green Valley.
Yes.
Okay. Green Valley and East Independence, so it has those numbers included. Has soft cost the property, Reading Rockets, security cameras, the technologies design.
I guess my question was, that is not in here at all.
Well, there's nothing else needed to go in, or we don't need to. So if you look back in the first column, you'll see that in the 3 preceding years, the library allocated $12.3 million to the capital funding. That was part of the initial plan when you put this together, is that you would have revenues.
My question was to understand, I'm not attacking your numbers. I'm trying to understand what is included in this and what is not. What you're saying to me is the money set aside to complete the capital projects is not included in here.
That's correct. That's correct. Okay. Sorry, if that was your question.
That's okay.
What is included though is what I'll call the forward maintenance on the properties. That is separate from just construction piece.
Okay.
I guess I consider this the construction piece, and there will be leftovers as I calculate.
It'll be useful to have that in here for me.
Well,
so you're saying there's 25 million set aside for that, is what you're saying, right?
At the end of June, there's 25 million.
Okay. Can I ask a question? Are you done? I have a question for you. And this may be more for Juan because it's for the numbers that you projected. So it says here, like current tax revenues, but we're going from here, we're going for next, and then we're going for the next year. That's based on kind of like what we have right now. And then you projected based on how it's been raised. I just wanted to ask. Okay, so that doesn't include any, because like I know Clay County and I know Platte County are having very significant growth. Clay County is about to get over by Liberty North High School, an enormous project that's houses and all kinds of stuff that I'm hoping will not be TIFed and we will get the taxes from that. And so I didn't know if you had any of those projections in there, or this is just that. That's why I was just asking if this was flat.
Yeah, this is a very, not in that detailed level
Right.
projection. This is the look back, the history, also based on the current assessments for all three counties. And well, the assessment we received just 2 weeks ago is higher than what we projected back in May. The biggest increase due to the personal property tax increased over 20%, which never happened before. Of course, there are other factors could impact the projection. For example, I believe Clay County may want to reduce the replacement tax. It could affect us maybe $100,000 or $200,000 a year, but that's not a part of my projection because it's not done yet, not been passed.
Lori, can I finish my comments and then I'll
Yeah,
open up for questions?
Thank you very much.
So again, to clarify that the capital cost funds are separate here. So a couple things to note on the calculation of the required surplus that's shown on here. Again, what's calculated is well in excess of the current policy. In the past 5 years, the largest operating drawdown through November was about 20 million. Okay, so if you think about funds we have to have at the end of June to get us through the next 6 months, if we have in the range of 36 million, we would utilize. We had historically drawn about 20 million down. Okay, so that would leave us well in excess of what the drawdown is. Quants has revenues that begin to come in the months of November and December. And typically, at least if you look in the last 5 years, about 1/3 of the budgeted revenues have been received by December 31st. Okay, the other thing, and again, I'm just going to reemphasize that the debt service is included in the surplus, the required surplus. That is not a part of the current board policy. Something I think the finance committee can take up at a later time. Okay. So the selected levy, the proposed levy of 0.3240 is a result of these calculations and evaluation of the surplus, the resulting surplus. The forward 3-year operating expense load, and you'll see the expense load is the same in both sets of columns, is $23 million higher than the most recent 3 years. So if you see in the last 3 years, 151 million was spent. The forward 3-year projection is for 173 million to be spent. That is higher than any 3-year period in the history of the library, at least. Well, I shouldn't say that. At least going back to 2013, which is far back as our schedules. We prepared our schedules. So you'll see my notes. We've considered debt service. We have that funded. We've included a maintenance reserve allocation. Again, we don't have a number. The building committee will bring forth that number over the course of the next year. The ending surplus exceeds the revised calculated minimum, and it also exceeds the current board policy maximum. Again, the maximum being 50% of the next year's expenses. I've already talked about the next one. So, and again, just to reemphasize, if we applied the statutory maximum, we've taken in $18 million more than is necessary to fund the items that are on this schedule. So again, that would be $18 million over and above the $23 million that is included in here for spending. So the committee discussed the proposed levy of 0.3240. When it's approved by the committee, and as I said, covers the cost and produces surplus in excess of the policy.
So can I
Those are my comments on the levy.
question? So by lowering that, how does that work with the, like, what people voted on, the maximum amount? Does that mean they voted that we take the maximum amount, or is that, did they vote? How was that voted upon?
Yeah, the voter approved levy,
Yeah.
maximum levy was 40 cents. Okay, that gets adjusted annually for Hancock. So because you have assessment, the Hancock adjustment looks at the growth in assessments. So if you think about it, and I'll call it, I tend to use bathtub water as my example. If you raise the water level in the bathtub, then the levy comes down by a corresponding amount so that you receive the same tax revenues. Okay, so what's happened, and I showed this at a previous committee, and I think a board meeting, was in the last several years, and really previous to 2017, you didn't see assessed values change. The Missouri Tax Commission started emphasizing and I'm going to say forcing the local assessors to adjust their assessed values. So you will see step ups in the assessed values in all three counties over the periods. You'll see those steps in the odd number of years. Okay, so because the assessors were raising the values, the levy correspondingly was reduced. There is, you have the effects of new construction coming in, and you also have an inflation adjustment that come into play. Okay, the current year's inflation adjustment is set at, well, the statutory Hancock maximum adjustment is 5%. The inflation can be higher, but 5% is the maximum. Correct, Juan?
Yeah, 6%.
Pardon?
6% for 2022. Inflation.
Inflation is 6. Right. Okay. So that's part of what's driving this, is the increased taxes that are coming in. Okay.
So I guess what that says is that wait, we can dance. So that we have, that's the maximum amount that we can take. It's not saying that we have to take this amount, it's saying this is the maximum amount.
I'm not aware of a statute that says taxing district is required to take the maximum.
Okay, so you're saying that with these projections that the library can run smoothly, excellent programs, and that we can, we have cushion in all these areas.
Well, I'm not going to speak to part of that because I can't. What I will say again is that the proposed adjustment to the budget, there will be $5 million more in the current year than was spent last year. For the 3-year projected, there is total spending of in excess of $23 million. Okay, so we're not reducing expenses. You can see the expense load does not yet. What we're doing is saying that because you have these other factors going on, and you have that are increasing taxes, and I know one person's taxes, if you think about it, are up by 48% over the last 4 or 5 years. The levy increase was 25. His taxes have gone up 25%. That's probably true in all 3 counties because of these valuation adjustments. But there's no, you can see there's, we're not, we'll talk about the budget amendment, and I guess after we go through the levy here, but we're not cutting expenses. If we spent 50 million last year, or 50.8 million last year, the budget would be 55.8. That's a $5 million increase. And I'll talk about that in the levy, in the budget adjustment piece.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment that I want to share with board members, and I printed it out so people can have the benefit of seeing it. So.
While he's passing that out, I just got a question. Particularly, I guess, for the folks here, this gets awfully complicated even who are at it all the time. I'm going to just try to simplify a little bit if I can. Someone pointed out in the discussion prior to the meeting that the amount voted by the residents in 2016, but the general election, I should add, in which there was a huge turnout, far bigger than normal, was voted 4.0 after extensive discussion with the voters, extensive discussion about the reason for that. It was door to door almost, trying to get people to speak out about what they felt that we should be doing. And so it was decided that we would put the 0.40 on. We did, and as was pointed out, it passed overwhelmingly. In the city of, most people don't know that we serve over 50% of the city of Kansas City per se. And the vote in that part of this of us of the election was 73%. In all other areas, I think the lowest vote was in Platte County, and I think that was about 59%. So I think you could say, particularly since it was in a general election, that this was an overwhelming vote in favor of the 0.40 for the library. Well, then why would we go to a 3.468, which was the amount that was discussed in the public hearing? We had quite a lively public hearing. Many of the board members did not attend. There are some people here I noticed that were in attendance at that meeting, and which we discussed the 3.468 number. And the 3.468 number is the equivalent of the voting on 0.40. Why is that so? It is because the state sees fit to pass laws for all that apply to all public jurisdictions that are using state are using tax revenue, that they have to reduce that by a certain amount. And so that is why we're at the 0.3468. And what you're proposing, what the committee has proposed, is a 0.3240. And that's a difference of 0.228. So what is the amount of dollars that is involved in reducing the voter approved levy rate of 3.3468 to 3.240? What is the amount of money that we are foregoing voluntarily as a result of this proposal? What's the dollar amount over the 2-year period?
I'd have to plug that.
Mr. Chairman, while that is being inquired, I have a motion. If there's a second on that motion, then I would be happy to explain.
Timeout. A motion on the floor. Okay, all right, timeout.
How can you?
I made it.
Hold on. Let me talk. Okay. Given what I did and I was taken to task for in some previous meetings, these documents you handed out were not in board docs. This is the first time we've seen them. And now you're proposing to vote on something that isn't on the agenda.
No, I am proposing on something that's on the agenda. I'm making a motion.
It's not on the agenda.
Point of order, there's already,
There's a motion
point
on the
of order,
floor.
there was already a motion on
The
the floor.
motion on the floor is.
I'm amending the motion. I'm amending the emotion.
Or parliamentarians over there.
You have a motion and a second on the floor for 0.3240. Brent is making a motion to amend that motion, right? So it would be, Mr. Chairman, I think it's at your discretion of whether or not to accept the motion to amend the motion passes, then we could have a new motion to vote on. If the amendment fails, then you're back to the motion.
Well, I'll forego the question and let it hold until this matter is decided.
Can I ask a question on just this? I have a question. So when we had this original in 2016, it was like, okay, it's a property value of 250,000. It's going to be like $40. Now the property values have increased so much. So a house literally that we bought in 2000 and this year just appraised at 511 because of the increase in the property values. And so now what was costing me $40 is now costing me $80. I voted for Proposition L. I wanted the libraries to be funded. We've gotten fabulous, wonderful libraries. I'm very excited about it. But my family, I lost my job this year, and it definitely our taxes are so much higher. We have a $35 million or $33 million excess, and I'm just wondering. I mean, I see what's been proposed here, but I can see why this has been brought up. But I think that kind of goes with what you were saying, Jim. Is I voted for it. I want the libraries. That's 100% what I want. But definitely our taxes are increasing every year. And as they keep continuing to increase, it's just going to keep going up every year because it's that percentage of, and it's for 15 years, right? Am I right? For 15 years, the proposition now? Or is it forever?
Levy is, it's a permanent levy.
Yeah.
And the thing about the levy, and I'll just read, the levy included the capital costs, okay? The $113 million, okay? Once that is done, then yes, theoretically, if you keep applying the statutory levy, you're going to keep collecting $113 million that you won't be spending on capital. You'll spend some of it on maintenance requirements, but we will build that in, and we factor that in here. But you don't have to pay the debt twice. Okay, once the debt's paid off, that you don't pay it again.
Well, we haven't. I mean, there's been discussion on a number of occasions about prepaying some of this debt because the repayment of the debt was vital in order to get this done in a quick way rather than wait for 20 years to get things done. So, but the debt has, I'm sorry.
I'd like to request a ruling from the chair about whether the amendment is accepted, just for purposes for people to understand. This amendment is a 1 cent reduction in the levy as opposed to 2.28 cents.
If I understand from our parliamentarian, we have a motion and a second on the floor from the head of the finance committee. Okay, we're having a discussion on that. During a discussion, Brent, you had proposed an amendment.
I'm proposing amending what the recommendation is of the finance committee. This is how the full board can participate.
Okay.
I would like to see this discussed first before we.
Excuse me, I'd like to have the discussion on what's the first motion completed before we go to an amendment on it. And there's still discussion going on with regard to that.
I'm a little confused. If you're amending something, you would vote on the amendment before you would go to the main motion.
Was there a second to the amendment?
I second.
Again, I think I mentioned it earlier. You've got a motion and a second for the main motion, right? So during discussion now, and there's an amendment that's been proposed to the levy to modify the original motion by some percentage. I think it would be appropriate to handle the amendment first, because if you go forward and vote on the main motion, you've either approved or not approved that levy. And so then it would kind of nullify a motion to amend. So I think a motion to amend would be appropriate. Now, to handle that first. That motion fails, then you're back to your original motion.
Okay, so I have a question. Okay, so in June, or whatever it was, May or June, I had a proposed budget and I was not allowed to present that because it was not in the agenda. Okay, and because the rules did not allow it. This has the same look. So now we have a new set of procedures for voting that were not allowed 3 months ago, but now they're going to be okay today. That makes no sense.
In that case, though, Gordon, the motion was made and failed, so there was no opportunity to amend after. This is where
I don't know that I guess you call it semantics. I also, as I said, this should have been presented. This should have been sent to the board. It's being handed out. There's no opportunity to review it, to understand it. I think that the motion of 1 cent is a token adjustment. Obviously, you're acknowledging. This acknowledges that we are taking in too much money. That's exactly what you're saying. My point is, we don't need to take in 0.3368. We take in 0.3240. We have more than enough money to do all the things that people think they want to do, to cover all the capital costs. We cover the debt service. We more than adequately fund surplus. And even if the assessments don't come into the same rate next year, we still exceed all the surplus calculations. I find this a token acknowledgement, and I don't think it's warranted. I think Kwan's analysis stands on its own. I think the numbers speak for themselves. Nobody's cutting things. I just find this highly unusual and unnecessary.
I'm going to call the chair for him to rule.
We've already had a rule.
Okay.
He
No, I
referred
like
back to the
that. At
chair.
this point, I would call the question on the initial motion.
Commentary on the question on the first motion.
Okay, so since we have a subsequent motion, I don't think you can call the question on the original motion with the subsequent motion still with the second on the table. So I think you have to dispose of the motion to amend. It's however it goes, and then you are back to your original motion. And at that point, if you want to call for the question on the original motion, you may do so.
If the if the amendment passes, then do we go back to the original one? No.
The amendment, this is an amendment right to the recommendation.
Correct.
So you still have to vote on the actual levy. So a vote on this amendment will not be the final vote on the levy.
Excuse me. I'm confused. So the amended motion here is to reduce the levy by 1 cent. So you're saying that even if this is passed, then there will be a second vote on the initial motion.
So actually what's going to happen is if this motion passes, let's play out that scenario. If this motion passes and it is modifying the recommendation, still you have not voted on the underlying.
So the modification is to amend the finance committee's findings by people that was made and seconded by people that were not on the finance committee and not present at the finance committee meeting.
That's loud.
Okay. All right.
What I
So
think is, I want to say something.
I'm just making a statement. So I just,
Okay,
again, I
what I
find
think is not
this.
fair, let me
Go ahead.
speak.
All right.
Okay, what I think is not, I do feel like we need to have something consistent, because I did see this happen to Gordon when he brought up something and it was railroaded down. No, it has to be on board docs ahead of time. I think we've got to have a consistent policy, because Brent, I think it was you that was really, you were really complaining.
I hear you, and
Okay.
I asked staff actually to post this on board docs.
It is in board docs. It's just not on the meeting agenda. It's in the library.
Well, okay, well, anyway,
No,
it wasn't like, we never saw
We
it.
have no.
We never saw it, and so I know, don't you agree, Brent? I mean, we have to have it consistent.
I'm prepared for my amendment to be defeated, but I'd like a chance to speak.
Well, I'm just saying, I just think we have to just have something
Can I
consistent.
speak to my amendment? Is that
We
possible?
do amendments all the time.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, you can't railroad somebody one week and say, this has to be on board docs, and we're not even gonna look at it. And then the next week, someone else presents something and say, oh, but
That
this
was
is fine.
after.
I'm gonna speak to the amendment. And if you're
Inconsistent.
predisposed to vote it down, I understand that entirely. So anyway, for just point of clarification, I was on the finance committee and I recently was removed, or not in the reconfiguring of the finance committee members. So it's not that I'm unfamiliar with these conversations, and I'm unfamiliar with these discussions. So I think the practical effect of the levy reduction is to reduce the authorized tax rate to an amount that is lower than what the voters approved in 2008, 2016 under Proposition L. Spoken to how many people voted in favor of it all. I think the levy reduction was a flawed process. It did not include important information from other board committees, especially building, technology, and personnel. Staff developed in response to a question from myself and Ms. Burgo, anticipated unbudgeted expenses in the upcoming years. So that's the handout that you have. I'm going to speak to the building committee, and if chairs of the personnel committee or the technology committee want to add additional information, that would be fine. The finance chair on several different occasions asked the building to develop a building maintenance fund to cover anticipated capital maintenance costs for the 30 facilities that we own. The finance committee did not have the benefit of that information when it met sort of recently. Staff developed this information. So our anticipated maintenance for 2023 to 2028, which is a 5-year period, is $13 million. The amount in 2023, I can't tell you whether this is a fiscal year or calendar year. I'm just looking at the information that's in front of me. Is 3.1 million. Frankly, there's a lot of investment in this building here. That includes a new HVAC and new roof. And so even when you go down to 2025, there's 3.27 million for maintenance. If you go back to the budget document, line 4, it talks the building maintenance funds. These were the best estimates that maybe were available to the people working on that budget. I'm telling you that other staff, have done additional work, and that currently that the reserve fund, which we intended to want to do and should do, is underfunded. So I would make that point. The other part of it is that our building construction costs, we hope, are funded, but we don't know the full impact of inflation. We have 2 remaining significant projects, East Independence and also Riverside. I'm thinking that there's other alternative uses for these accumulated funds, and the one that I would primarily point to was the opportunity to pay off the principal. If you look at the official bond document, it says that we can prepayment in March of 2026. And at that point, we will still owe 43.7 million on it. And at that point, we will owe $15.5 million on it. I think there's a wonderful opportunity to reduce our interest payments. Nobody in the room benefits from interest payments unless you're a bondholder of these bonds, and that if we take the available surpluses that we have and use it for principal reduction, whether we're able to do the full amount or some portion of it all, then I think that would be something that's worth considering. Talked about the new buildings. We have had and we have struggled. I'm going to acknowledge sort of publicly difficulties with process that has come up here tonight. I'm concerned about where the public is in our deliberations. We know that they voted overwhelmingly in November 2016 at a presidential election in favor of increasing mid-continent's resources. That was the Proposition L. We know that they turned out in large numbers for a public hearing to speak in support of the staff proposed levy and budget. One might think that the matter was settled, at least for this year, and then there was a new effort to go back in light of additional information, assessments and things like that, to reconsider what might be appropriate. I get that. I understand that. The law allows for a voluntary levy reduction, which is permitted. I'm concerned that at our public meeting agenda, and if you look at 7.31, which we're considering right now, and item 7.41, the Finance Committee budget amendment, are rather vague, the public document, about what it is that we intend to do. You have to get and log in as a board member with a password and a user ID to see what the full intent was. There was no reasonable notification to the public that the intent was to lower the budget levy and also to lower the budget. I'm concerned because we have another consideration right past this about reducing the budget, and we're a third of the way through the fiscal year.
Yeah.
Third of 4 months. June, July, August, September.
July, August, September.
July, August,
1.
excuse me.
September. Sorry.
Didn't trust me with math because I was been called out. We're 3 months into the fiscal year. On the notification, I think this is a bad practice, and I want to kind of call this out, and I want to elevate this because the Missouri Open Meeting and Sunshine Law, Section 610-020 specifically states, all public governmental bodies shall give notice of time, date, and place of each meeting and its tentative agenda, and I'm going to boldface this, in a manner reasonably calculated to advise the public of the matters to be considered. If you look at our public agenda, it just says we're going to approve a budget amendment and we're going to approve a levy change. It doesn't provide you sufficient detail to understand whether we were increasing, decreasing, or ratifying what is previously sort of proposed.
Well, it says summary. That doesn't seem like it.
Point of order. I believe Carmel has the floor.
I'm raising this because in some senses, I don't believe what was posted on for the benefit of the public in a manner reasonably calculated to advise the public of the matters to be considered. It just said we're going to talk about something. It didn't tell you the nature of the direction of the policy consideration by the board.
Okay, Brian, I think some of the discussion is going from the proposed amendment.
That concludes my comments.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, and there has been discussion to amend the.
And I would like to have further discussion as well. We don't have one part. From the Personnel Committee, a couple of things that haven't been considered. We have to build back our health insurance fund. It was anticipated that we spend that down post-COVID with people who had been postponing healthcare visits and stuff to go, so that we knew that post-pandemic they'd be going back and doing that, and that would spend down our insurance backup, our health insurance backup. That needs to be rebuilt. We currently have 30 FTEs, especially currently the FTEs for East Independent that are not budgeted but need to be staffed. And it's in that is also in there. We also have coming up a salary survey. There was a discussion from the Personnel Committee about making sure that we're compensating our employees at an appropriate level. The salary survey has not even been looked at. And so all those 30 positions are kind of on hold right now, but we need them to staff our buildings. And if we don't have enough staff, then we're going to have to look at hours to make sure that we have adequate coverage for the hours we have available. We also have coming up our health insurance costs. We all know the health insurance is increasing. Our staff has been wonderful negotiating that to a reasonable level, but we do not have those costs in as yet. And that's my concerns from the Personnel Committee.
Any other discussion? Okay, it's been moved and seconded, and there's been discussion to vote on the amendment for a volunteer rollback of 1% to do with
1 cent.
1 cent.
Not 1%.
1 cent. Okay, right. Please, Tracy, would you call a individual
John,
Yes.
Brett,
Yes.
Michelle. No. Rita,
No.
Dr. Pandolfi,
No.
Michael,
No.
Lori,
Yes.
Noel,
No.
Gordon,
No.
Joycelyn,
Yes.
Ron.
No.
Okay, the motion fails.
Let's go back to the discussion on the first motion. If there's any.
I have a question. Given the level of funding you're recommending, and given that the budget that has been set, and I know this is coming up later, but it's part of my consideration now, being that the budget was compiled based on needs, what cuts, how much of a cut are you looking at in our budget that has been based on needs?
Do that in the next motion.
I think it's informative for my decision.
I'll go through my comments on the budget. Can I do that? Okay. So the current budget, that means 57.1 million, was prepared to be balanced, i.e. total revenues equal total expenses. Okay. The basis for the proposed reduction of 1.3 million is that if revenues are reduced by approving a voluntary levy reduction, then expenses should also be reduced to maintain a balanced budget. Okay. Historically, the budget was prepared as follows. We took estimated revenues, we deducted annual debt service, the remainder was allocated to operating expenses. Okay. Expenses were then loaded, excuse me, to absorb the available net revenue. The exceptions were 2018, when capital fund allocation was 7.7 million, and fiscal year 20, when 1.3 million was allocated out of the initial revenue estimates. Okay. Except for those 2 years, capital fund allocations occurred after the end of the fiscal year. Actual expenses have been less than total budget expenses in every year since at least 2013. And that's as far back as we took a look. And except for 2015, when there was a significant technology spend, I believe the number is approximately $2 million. The excess budgeted versus actual expenditures for the years 13 through 20 averages in excess of $2 million. For both 21 and 22, the excess exceeds $5 million. Okay. The current budget, and this was given to me in writing by the former CEO, was prepared on the same basis as the prior years. Therefore, I can assume that a similar excess exists within the current budget. Okay. The proposed 23 expenses of 55.8 after the reduction provides $5 million over the actual fiscal year 22 expenses of 50.8 million. Changes that I understand to be taking place. Green Hills is expected to open this fall. Lee Summit reopened in June of 22. North Oak will open somewhere in spring of 23, so that has a nominal impact on the current fiscal year. And the new Green Valley building is expected to open in late summer 23, so that has no impact on the current fiscal year. Okay. That's the basis. Okay. So if historically the expenses were loaded to absorb the revenue, and we've never spent 55 million, let alone 57 million, it seems a bit. I guess I question what you define as the needs, because it seems like the budget is built in once. Well, I shouldn't say budget includes needs, but it also includes, it appears to include wants, because we have never spent the budget. And historically, in the last 10 years, we, absent the 1 year where apparently, I don't know what the technology issue was, obviously funds were available, but when you exclude that, you've never spent the budget. And the current salary structure, I put that up on the board. I looked at salaries historically. You have that in your board packet. It's discussed at finance committee meeting. When you look at the head counts, we looked at July of 17, 19, and 22, just to get an indication of what was happening with staff counts. At the end, in the July 17 payroll, there were 931 employees, okay? Headquarters had 170. In July of 19, there were 899 employees, 176 at headquarters, so a slight increase. In July of 22, the head count was 800. Okay, and the head count at headquarters was 171. So basically, in 5 years, headquarters head count is flat. Branch head counts have gone from 761 to 629. The salary costs, or I'll call it the salary costs, are higher. Okay, by in a 5-year period by 21% overall, but the average rate for headquarters has decreased 28%. Branch rates have increased 20%. The overall rate increase is 23%. So, if there are salary adjustments still coming, it appears that salary adjustments were made over these past 5 years.
I may address, there's so much in there I'd like to address, but I will address the personnel issues. First of all, when buildings open are not the same time that we actually hire and train staff. So hired staff would have to be hired earlier than that to get them trained and ready to be at an open building. 2, during the times that you are referencing, we were actually down about 100 positions that we were holding on because of pandemic. Also, speaking to budget as a whole, if you take out the pandemic years and the construction years, when our buildings were closed, not fully staffed, not fully doing programming, we spent 96, 97% of our budget. We were not, and I take exception to your presentation of the budgeting process as us padding our wants. I think that is, I don't think that is correct. From my understanding of the budgeting process, the staff looks at the needs, and the needs always outweigh what our resources are, and then they work backwards to see what they can do with the resources we have. To then turn around and say that it's padded, I would like to know, if you're planning on cutting the budget, what exactly do you think is padding and what will be cut? We have no indication of that. The only indication that's been said is staff will figure it out. If you think things are padded, let me know what they are, so we know what will be cut.
Why is anything going to be cut when we have $5 to $6 million a year extra?
If we cut the levy, we won't.
Yes, we will. That's what Kwan's numbers proved.
If projections come out as planned, you want to know where the $5 million extra is going to go? To staff our buildings, to increase our programs, to handle the population increase that also drives those increases. I don't understand if you're saying, I guess for me to understand this, if you're saying cut the levy because you're taking in too much, but because you cut the levy, now we have to cut the budget, which was based on needs and based on what the voters voted.
But I don't think the budget is being cut.
He's saying the budget has to be reduced. It has to balance.
That's what's being used is not being cut, because he's been with one's projections.
It will be used.
There's already extra, but in years past it hasn't been used. So I feel like this is.
We have more buildings, more staff, more.
No, with all due respect, we do not. Kwan, have we increased branches in the last 4 years?
Yes. Yes.
What?
Easterly Summit is the new.
Okay, so it's 5 added 1. Okay. So I'm going back.
But we've also increased
hold on.
the size of our branches.
If we're allocating revenues based on needs, okay, I'm going to go back to the capital. We needed capital funds, right? So why was it in only 2 of the years we allocated revenues off the top for the capital needs. That was this is the 2019 budget right here, okay? So it talks about net taxes due to increase in assessed valuation and annual operating surplus, okay? So the projection for the capital needs included revenues that you expected to come in. There was no allocation. That should have come off the top, okay? That didn't happen, okay? The other side is if there's, the history says you don't spend it all, and you can come up, I can come up with 100 reasons why, as can you, but history speaks, okay? The fact that you're telling me that we need more money in the health insurance fund contradicts what Quan just reported.
I didn't say the health
Yes, it
insurance
did.
fund. I said the backup for unexpected expenses.
It's-
We are
it's the same-
self-funded. We are
It's the
self-funded.
same pool of money. It's the same pool of money, okay? I would expect to see claims increase. He reported claims. I looked at the claim numbers. They don't look that high. We can't have any more surplus. So that is something that we determine down the road. But again, you know, you're throwing out all these ifs. I'm saying that even with the levy reduction, you have 5 million more next year, 23 million over and above what you spent the last 3 years. And I still will end up with somewhere around 38 million of surplus, which is far in excess of what the current policy requires.
My basic question has not been answered. If the levy reduction will reduce the budget, what is going to be cut? I have my pencil here, my pen here.
I thought I wasn't supposed to get into details with staff. I thought that was
It's an
I thought
important
that was
issue for me.
you tell me that was
to
my
know.
managing. So you're telling me staff can't go in and figure out how to pull 1.3 million out of a budget?
It's not 1.3 million. It's, you're using up the excess that we have. It's 1.3 million,
It's
and
1.3
4 point something next year.
There's no 4 million anywhere. Where are you getting 4 million? There's no 4 million anywhere.
Whatever.
Yeah, you should be able to call in and he'll let you.
I'm sorry, I have to leave. Good job.
Okay, if I could just join this conversation here. I think we've had discussions of needs and wants and things like that. One thing I've been hearing about for over a year now is expenditures to have kiosks for people to download books at the airport. And my thought would be, is that a need or a want that the taxpayers in Jackson, Clay, and Platte County should have to pay for? So somebody coming in from Chicago, laid over in Kansas City, on the way to Detroit, can download a free book. And my thought would be, if you can afford the airline ticket, maybe you can afford to download the book at home, or go to somebody who already has a job, needs a salary at one of the booths. And we can have that as a service for people passing through, or we can leave the resources in the families in Jackson, Clay, and Platte County. We have to pay groceries at 13% increase now, inflation nationally at 8%. And statistics I just heard, I thought was staggering, but CNN said that 25% of the American families right now are on a need level. No wants, no going out to movies, just at needs, 25% of the families. I'm thinking, hey, share the wealth, but also share some of the burdens on it too.
I agree with you that I would like to see, okay, you say don't do the kiosk. That's a concrete thing. That doesn't add up to $5 million. And I would also say that the times you're talking about where people cannot afford things, people cannot afford groceries, people cannot afford gasoline, those are precisely the times when they rely even more heavily on the library.
Maybe. So they also pay more taxes too.
I don't know if you're reading this.
We're talking about, for the individual person, the average of, this was $7.50.
I want to go.
Less than that.
The services aren't going
Time out.
down.
We're not.
They are. He's saying don't do kiosks.
You're coming up with a
We
$5
don't
million
do kiosks.
reduction. There is no $5 million reduction. We're in this analysis.
No.
It is a $1.3 million reduction against 57.1. Okay. Which is a $5
So
million.
you're saying that 2.2 million.
Can I finish?
Is going to add up to.
Can I finish? It's a $5 million increase over what we spent last year. That is $5 million over what you spent last year. I heard nobody and I've listened to the public speak at June tonight. I've not heard, I don't think, I could be wrong, not heard one person saying, you are not doing enough. You need to do more things. I need another branch in North. I need all these things that you're not doing right now. Okay?
I've heard
I don't
that.
think I've heard that.
I've heard that all the time.
That's not the made
You heard-
consensus.
I don't think I heard that tonight.
Look at,
It's hard to hear when you don't.
Everyone here is saying,
Everybody, please keep your public comments to yourselves, okay, or you will be asked to leave.
look
I appreciate the
at,
tensions are high, but please keep them to yourself.
at
Thank you.
all the statistics they give us every time about the
Mr. Chairman.
people's
Yes.
um, services. I mean, just look at the response from the public about the services that we're offering.
I just,
Brent has the floor.
Truly, two quick comments and then the cost of the kiosk is estimated to be $60,000 to $70,000, which is potentially what we might spend on review of the construction contract. Second factual item is that Jackson County provides 50% of the revenue to fund this consolidated library district. Having said those things, I'm not so sure that the conversation is going to be helpful in changing people's points of views and minds, and in consideration of the time and the hour and the like. I'm going to call the question.
Good. So we would have a motion to call the question, which I believe requires a second.
Do we have the
No.
people, were they,
No.
able-
It doesn't,
No.
it came from.
were they able to get
Came from
online?
committee? Okay.
Were they able to get online, Ron?
I put it this way, I would hope that we would wait till we know till Michelle.
Yes, we are on the line.
Okay, is online because it was not an effort to exclude her from
I know,
from participating in voting. So
I know you were.
Is there any room for
yes.
a question or should? Must we?
Call the question.
Okay, let's call the question.
We need to vote.
Okay, Teresa, want to have a, I call the roll, please.
Okay, John,
No.
Brent,
No.
Michelle,
Yes,
Rita? Yes. Ron,
Yes.
Dr. Pandolfi,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Lori?
Yes.
Noel? Cody, is Noel on the line?
I think she's with, yeah, she's with Michelle.
Did you say it?
yes, I said yes.
Okay, thank you. Gordon?
That's sorry.
Yes, you're fine. Joycelyn?
No.
Motion carries.
Mr. Chair, a quick point of personal privilege. Sure. I just want people to know that Dr. Wilson, I don't know the details, was in a car accident.
Oh, no.
And so don't know her, other than that, and that accounts for her absence this evening. So I just wanted to include that.
Now, Susan's accident was going to be mentioned at the end of the meeting, but we certainly can keep prayers and very best wishes. Any reason information out yet?
She was on her way here is all we know.
Yeah.
And she was in a car accident. There hasn't been any more update on it. We don't know anything else.
Thank you.
proceed. Proceed. No, we haven't voted on this amendment. On this. We have to vote on this one.
You need to read it. You need to read.
Okay,
Richard.
I've already explained it, the budget amendment, approval for the recommendation from the Finance and Audit Committee to the full board that the total tax revenues for fiscal year 22-23 operating budget be reduced from the current estimated amount of $62,600,000 to $61,290,000, a decrease of it should be 1310, not the 1300 that's up there. And with a corresponding reduction of an equal amount of the total budgeted expenditures. That is approval from the committee.
Gordon, you said it should be 13. I'm sorry.
Well,
1310.
62,600,
It's another
62,600 to the 290 is 310. Let's put it this way, whether it's if it's a 1.3, I don't care. The 10,000, I don't care.
Okay, thank you.
So which one is it? Which one carries?
Whatever the difference. So.
No, well, no,
No, I'm not discussing. It's just a point.
I don't know which one carries. Mr.
Got to do the math right. So you're you're decreasing the budget by $1,310,000.
Correct. Should be a decrease of one.
It's just a typo.
It's a typo
Okay, thank you.
on the. All right, so it's a decrease of 1,310,000. That's the motion from the committee.
Okay, we've had a motion that doesn't require a second. Any further discussion?
Didn't say anything. I know Lori had her hand up.
Yeah, I am concerned why we're putting it, is this your line 2 that you have on here?
Yes.
And so you have to have this to make the numbers work, what just passed with the second or 2 cents.
Again, the reason for the budget adjustment is so that we have a balanced budget. We're reducing revenues and we want to maintain a balanced budget. Then the proposal that was approved by the committee is to decrease the expenses by the same amount. That reduces, again, that still allows for the $5 million increase over the current year.
Mr. Chairman. How will these cuts be determined? Who and how and why and when will be, what's the method for informing the board of what the nature of them might be?
I would propose that the staff take that up, present it to the finance committee in October and bring it back to the board for final approval in October.
The budget has to be completely rewritten before and distributed to the counties before the end of October. So it'll have to go to the finance committee and then it'll come to the full board. If we can get it done in that quarter.
Which means we'll have to have another meeting.
I mean, basically, yeah.
Before September 30th.
No, the only thing that has to go to the counties is
A copy of the board approved budget has to go to the counties. That has to be done that's by statute by the end of October.
end of October.
Yes, the levy certification, it's two separate things, two separate things.
I didn't understand that was included, that this was included. I thought that this was a separate, but I see what you're saying is that it's there, so.
I ask these things for just clarification. So when we last time considered a budget, we had a 6-6 vote and it tied in. We were, as a board, unable to pass a budget, and then the staff proposed budget took into effect. Would that be the same situation as we consider and take up a new budget?
Based on the new levy, that's my assumption. Is that a correct assumption?
Well, so you had a vote, right, sometime earlier this year on a budget. So in that, as Brent said, that vote was a 6-6 tie. Under your policies, then the staff recommended budget automatically goes into effect. That is the budget under which you are now operating. Right. A budget amendment is, I guess, being offered, and I'm going to have to defer to Quan on whether or not the budget amend the budget is required in order to make it a balanced budget. I can't give you that opinion, but if you have a budget reduction, then when you come back in October at your October meeting with a new budget, then I would say the net effect is going to be, if it's not approved by the board with an affirmative vote, then at that time, that staff recommended budget will go into effect.
Those same processes too.
Right. You're just repeating the same process.
So I have a question that may kind of be something, I mean, according to your numbers for this year, there will be a $4.6 million excess. And that is if we cut the budget by 1.31 million. Is that correct? Because if we add the 1.31 million to that, then we wouldn't have to, we would have a less amount of surplus. So if we take the 4,672,252 minus the 131,000, that would give us a $3.3 million surplus plus our $36 million of surplus that we're saving. So our excess surplus would be 3.3 million, and then we would not have to cut the budget. Is that what I'm understanding? Because then we wouldn't have to modify the budget. We would still keep the programs and stuff that we have. I mean, I'm looking at your numbers.
Your calculation is correct. You would have, as this is presented, you would have an excess, projected excess of 3.3. Okay, you would not have a balanced budget. Okay, which has been the basis, which was the basis for the budget amendment, was to maintain a balanced budget.
A balanced budget would have a zero at the bottom.
No, a balanced budget means I have revenues. The balanced budget is not, the balanced budget and surplus are two different things. Okay, the balanced budget means my revenues equal my expenditures. The surplus is a calculation of what's available after I take into account revenues, expenses, and all the other factors that are coming into play here. Okay, so the budget is the spending limit that is set by the board. I will say that if the board adopts this resolution, okay, then we will have, in my view, a board-approved budget. And we're not operating with the board-approved budget. We're operating with a default mechanism that is a policy that says one thing. It says the statute reads that the board has to adopt a budget. The policy says if the board fails to do its job, then the staff budget goes into effect. It seems to me that the intent of the statute is the board should act. The board should adopt a budget. So the proposal here is to reduce the expenses that are budgeted by 1.3 million. Again, that provides 5 million over and above what's spent last year. We will have a balanced budget, and if we get approval from the board, we will then have a board approved budget. I think that would be the prudent thing to do on behalf of taxpayers. And that's what I recommend.
But I still don't know where we're getting a balanced budget when we have no zero on this.
But you're trying to compare surplus to an operating budget. So,
I mean, these are the numbers that you used for me to vote from. So I'm confused now, because now we're going back and saying we will not have a surplus excess. Because if we're going to have a surplus excess, then we should not have to cut anything from our budget.
No, the point is, well, I don't know what the surplus excess is going to be, because, I don't know how some of these pieces roll out, but if we have $36 million at the end of next year, we can take into consideration the budget changes that may occur that might come from health insurance or may not, or something that happens with the building that isn't in the current capital plan that takes into account that there can be any myriad of things that happen. But the point here is to get to a balanced operating budget. So revenues on the operating side equal expenses. And since we've reduced revenues, the recommendation from the committee is to reduce expenses by a corresponding amount so that we have a balanced operating budget.
Mr. Chairman, I've got a technical question. Is there a statutory requirement that we have a balanced budget? Or is that a preference?
That's a good question. I'm not prepared to answer that for you.
I did not see it in the
We've
statute.
always got a balanced budget.
Always had one.
Yeah, I always had one. In the statute for consolidated library districts, I did not see that.
I think statute says the board has to adopt a budget.
Yeah.
No, I'm just trying to, as we dig into this, I'm just wanting us to sort of understand. So I share the concern is that I'll tell you why I raised this question. If our reserve is over our policy of 50%, and there was a presentation by the auditor that says 57.1%, how do we use those resources appropriately in support of library operations and or building plans or building improvements. So if we're accumulating money in our reserves that exceed what it is that our policy allows, then how do we then access those excess surplus funds above our policy for some other library use?
Yeah, there, may I?
Certainly, please.
Yeah, I was reading something, sorry.
I have two questions that may be appropriate to this. It was mentioned earlier that we're conducting a wage survey. When is that wage survey supposed to be done? We have not done so for several years, and the board was very anxious to get that done because of a sense that we were falling behind in wages for our personnel. When will that be done?
It should be the end of this month, the 1st of October is when we're anticipating getting that report back.
Okay, so there will be room then in our budget for wage increases that we do not now know what they are because we don't have the facts and the information from the wage survey that we have requested the staff to produce, which has not yet been done. That's number one. Number two is Quan, once, I'll put you on the spot. Once you described to me the amount of money that it would take that we would have to put in this year and next year, and I think back then it would have been 3 years in a row, in order to be in a position to repay more quickly the debt that we have. So remember when we had that discussion?
Yes.
You remember what that amount was?
Well,
we need to put in every year in order to get to the point where we could actually consider faster repayment and therefore a significant savings?
Well, first it depends on if we want to repay 100% or not. If it's 100%, that's over $43 million. We have, that's in 2026. So that's about 3 to 4 years from now. So we have to put $10 million at least. But, really depends on if we want to do prepayment 100% or not.
Yeah, but if we wanted to make some prepayment.
Yeah, if that's half, then we need a $5 million a year to set aside.
So, I mean, one of the things that we're doing right here, I think, is that we're saying that we're not going to have the funds available to consider repayment. I mean, that's out.
Yeah, if we do nothing, then I don't see.
Sure. Yeah, there's no way to do it. So, I mean, we're making a decision now to not consider repayment, early repayment.
For next year, right?
26.
For next year.
For 2 years.
This is a 2 year this is for 2 years.
Yeah,
right?
this is
Yeah, but we have to accumulate the funds in order to do the repayment. We can't just take that big chunk out of the budget to do the repayment. We have to start accumulating that in order to make.
At the same time, accumulate.
So we do have the 25 million sitting there, but we hold that just for in case like of emergency, right? That's what we're keeping for that building fund. That's why we're not using that money to pay any of that back. Right?
No, the 25 million is committed for construction.
Yeah.
These are major problems. Right. The bulk of it is, okay. The bulk of it is committed for construction, okay. So I guess to in reference to your comment on the debt repayment, we can extract funds out of the public hands who are in the same predicaments. Maybe they'd like to pay off some of their debt. Maybe they're getting hit with higher taxes, and not only from this taxing jurisdiction. So we're saying we're going to take out the money away from the public because the library can make better use of it by paying off their debt, which we're not obligated to pay early. Okay, if we have inflation, then it's to our benefit to defer the payment of the debt and pay it off at cheaper dollars. So I'm wondering why we would want to extract. I guess my view is we should not be extracting money out of the public's pockets to the taxpayers' pockets to pay our debt early. We should let them keep their money. And this is kind of I think a key difference between your view and mine is I look at the taxpayers and say, what are they, is the library fulfilling, and does it have the resources it needs to fulfill its mission? And I'm looking at, we're spending $23 million more over 3 year, we're projecting to spend $23 million more over a 3-year period than we spent in the last period. And again, I'm not going to debate the details. And we're covering the needs. And on top of that, you want to take out another 18 million of funds that we don't need because you want to pay off the debt early. I just don't think that's necessary. Let's leave the money in the public's hands. That's where it belongs.
And
they can determine
how much money are we talking about?
18 million.
Leaving in their hands. I mean, I'm talking about for every house, for each house.
John, I don't think we should do taxes on that basis because again, I know in Platte County, there are, 40 different levying agencies. Right? So if everybody took that same attitude, it's like, how much more money can we extract from the public? No wonder that they're maxing out their credit cards and having difficulty paying bills because everybody, if the attitude is let's just take the money because we can, then put them in that position.
Pretending that the taxes that are paid for library use are a major part of the taxing issue that you're speaking of is a real false way to look at it.
I didn't say it was large. I said
if
all the agencies took the same approach, then how much money would be extracted in the aggregate from the taxpayers' hands?
I have no idea.
Okay, we're getting
a little bit conceptual here.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Two things, and this is for the Finance Committee to look at later. The question is, I think there's an interest differential between what we're able to earn by state-approved investments and what it is we're paying on the bond. And so I think we're going to find that the bond interest is really higher than what we're able to earn. So I just want to give that as an assignment.
Remember the bonds were issued with a high coupon, higher than.
I'm just asking the Finance Committee to.
Bonds were issued with a high coupon so people could have a later resale opportunity.
I'm just asking the Finance Committee to take a look at that. The other thing is, this was actually raised when I was on the Finance Committee. The idea is that if we wanted to help our library patrons is that we would give some consideration to fine free. That I think there's a cost benefit analysis that shows we probably spend as much in collecting fines as what it is that we're able to take in and fines, and we should sort of give that some sort of consideration. Most library systems do have that, so it's not a topic for tonight, but I've been brought up several years, and we've never really as a board talked about that, and I think it would be beneficial for us to talk about that if we're talking about how it is to help our library patrons.
Can you call the question?
Okay, we've been around so many times. We're still going back to the first motion, right?
No, we're going back to the budget
We're on
amendment
this
motion. So that's one on the table. That's presented by the committee, and there's no second required.
It's 25 after 8. We have at least one more thing we have to vote on.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to adopt the budget amendment as set forth on the screen. Teresa, it came from the committee?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Teresa, just call the roll, please.
John,
No.
Brett,
No.
Michelle,
Unmute, sorry. Yes.
Rita. Yes. Ron.
Yes.
Sorry, Ron. meant to call you. Dr. Pandolfi.
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Lori,
No.
Noel,
Yes.
Gordon,
Yes.
Joycelyn.
No.
And the motion carries.
Okay, the last item, this will take 10 seconds. Quan and I are meeting with Central Bank next week to talk about the investments. So that's it for the finance committee.
Technology Committee.
Lori, she's online.
Hello, Lori. You with us?
Yes, I'm here. So Brian is coming in right now. I'm actually in the parking lot. He's going to make the presentation, and Joycelyn is going to yesterday. But the Brian is on his way in right now. Can you go to the next slide? So there is a recommendation, and Brian can talk about this a little bit more, about the technology committee to the full board for the staff to conduct online security training for all staff, not to exceed $5,000. And this training is something that we have to do to make sure that people don't, click on things they're not supposed to. It's up to 1,200 license. And I'd like to be short and sweet and have everybody, vote for this. But if we could have, it's already been motioned and second. So I'm not sure what we need to do for the next one.
Don't need a second because it came from the committee. So
Just talk.
just a discussion. If there's no discussion, then we vote on it and we move on.
Ryan, any comments?
No, this is just something that we wanted to have in the budget, and I missed it. And it's something we'd like to do annually to kind of keep our staff prepared, to keep them trained on security measures. So, and we're just making sure we have the permission to do it. So.
Great. I have a question.
Yeah.
In the technology budget, you have 60,000 for a miscellaneous contingency and 50,000 for miscellaneous software for staff.
It'll come out of the miscellaneous software.
Okay, thank you. So it's in the budget. It's in the budget. It's just not.
Technically is. It's not a line item in the
line item.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any discussion? Good. It's been presented by the committee to adopt the resolution as presented on the screen. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining?
Hear them online. Yeah, you need to slow down so they can unmute. We need the vote. We got the three.
Hi from Michelle. Hi from Noel.
Thank you.
Hi from Lori.
Thank you. Done.
Lori, what is it that you said you wanted me to do? This is Joycelyn.
We're going to just read the second one, but Brian is there so he can do it.
Okay.
So this one is, we previously used some different software to control our public PCs and manage those so that we can keep them up to date. We would like to change that software. So this is something else that we would take out of that miscellaneous software for staff contingency, but it's not specifically spelled out in the line item in the budget. And we just like to change software to be able to do that. And so it's you can see the motion. I don't have my glasses on, so I'm having a hard time reading it. So
It says approval of the recommendation of the technology committee to the full board to change software and software vendors to maintain the public computers PCs not to exceed $12,000.
Yep. That's it.
Further discussion? Okay, all in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Got it. Opposed? Abstaining? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Due to the considerations of time, we've proposed that the librarian's report, which was a presentation from Jake, be postponed until some other time.
We're just going
I'm sure there's no objection to it at 8:30. And new business.
That's me to put strategic.
Yeah, I'll keep this as short as possible. During previous meetings, John had mentioned the strategic plan that was put in place a number of years ago, and some thoughts were that we revisit a strategic plan for what are the current needs. So if any member of the board is interested in that, please express that interest to Teresa, and she'll be in touch with us. Also too, I noticed, especially in the past 9 to 18 months, when we had to refer to the policies and the bylaws, it seemed that there were instances in which those documents were either not addressing an issue or addressing an issue in a way that could be brushed up pretty well. So that's the thing. If anybody else has any recollections of instances when either, again, the bylaws or the policies could be looked at again, also please direct that to Teresa, and we'll see what interest there is to go in either one of those matters. So it's strategic plan and bylaws and policies, especially strategic plan. Oh, yeah.
We have one last voting item that you've got to vote on tonight. No, not the adjournment. Okay, so you have 2 more items. Every year, every fall, the Missouri Local Government Employee Retirement System, we affectionately call loggers, meets annually to discuss the retirement program. We send 2 representatives every year. One of them is a staff representative who is voted by staff members. That has already been done. There's always, we need to have a board representative to go to this. It is October. Sorry, I just blanked on what the dates are, but it's in October. It's like a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, October 27, 28. Thank you very much. And it's in Springfield this year at the DoubleTree. That much I do know. Both Joycelyn and Michelle have gone in the past. The library does pay for this. We do know that the hotel is filling up really quick. So whoever gets elected by the board tonight needs to get with Teresa tomorrow so that we can get the room reservation made and so that we know you have a place to stay.
So what, can you tell us a little bit about it?
I have never attended. I know that they discuss, I don't know.
Do you want me to
remember
speak?
Joycelyn? Jennifer? Yes, Jennifer.
Yeah, I'm here. Hey, the loggers meeting will be informational for starters, but there is typically, and I haven't looked to see what is up for vote this year, but we're typically voting on board members for the loggers board. So the statutes that govern loggers require for us to have an election among employees to send an employee representative, and for the board to elect a trustee or employer representative. And I will say this real quick, if I don't know who's going, but if we don't get someone, that you guys can also, the board can appoint a staff member to represent them as well. So.
This is Michelle. I don't know who can go. I'm available this year. I don't know if Joycelyn wants to go. It makes no difference to me, or if someone else wants to go.
Frank Shalimar, I move we appoint Michelle.
I think that's wonderful.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Okay, what's this?
You need to vote.
Yeah, I'm reading it. So we have the motion. Do we have a second?
Yeah, that's all second.
Okay. We should probably curtail discussion before she gets out. Yeah. Okay, it's been moving second.
We need to ask if anybody. Do we need to ask if anybody else wanted to go?
Silence.
It makes no difference to me. I mean, it's a great conference. Michelle has been personal chair and I've been personal chair. It's usually been a chair that's gone.
Well, and if Michelle gets home and looks at her calendar, and she can't go, Joycelyn could be your backup if you wanted to do that as well.
Sounds good.
Okay.
I'll amend the motion to.
So it's been moving a second that we have Trustee Wyckoff represent the library at the Loggers Convention. In her absence, Joycelyn would be an alternate. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, Michelle's fine. Okay, announcements, have you have any?
Okay, I have 2 quick announcements. They're in your board packet, but at my request, Joycelyn has kindly moved the personnel committee meeting from the second Wednesday to the first Wednesday because I am out of the country October 9th through the 17th. So the Personnel Committee, for those of you who are on that, will be 1 week early. And going forward, Gordon has moved the Finance Committee meetings to the second Thursday of each month at 10 o'clock. So they're no longer on the first Thursday.
I've got a quick announcement. Because of conflicts, the building committee scheduled for 9 AM on Thursday will be rescheduled.
This week?
No.
Didn't know that. Okay.
That's why I'm sharing it.
Okay, good to know.
Share it with Jake and share it with, just so we can have full participation by the committee. So details to come.
Trustees' comments?
I think we failed the voters today. That's all I have to say. I think we failed them and I'm sorry, I'm speaking, Yummy, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I think we failed. I think we failed the voters today. I think they spoke loud and clear, and I think we didn't listen. And for that, I apologize.
Other comments?
I think that we did a great job. I think that we're providing good services and for less money, so great.
Other comments?
Move we adjourn.